And that essentially means that the welfare gain from getting 1 hour in autumn is not compensated by the loss from losing 1 hour in spring.
So that's the worker productivity side of things. But what about how we spend money in our spare time?
It's true that by allowing ourselves more light in the afternoon over summer, then we enjoy more leisure-related activities. Exposure to light in the afternoon would benefit those businesses that depend very much on leisure. Think of golf clubs or restaurants, any country that makes a significant income out of tourism, they would probably benefit from having more light in the afternoon.
And there is something else we've not yet thought about.
Sleep deprivation generally affects more vulnerable populations, so older people, children, people with chronic conditions are far more affected, whilst the benefits from, let's say, setting the time in the, say, daylight saving time, so having more time in the afternoon, typically are reaped by healthier people, stronger people, you could argue, health-wise. Essentially, choosing one time or another has an implication on the health inequalities in the country, and ultimately in how much we prioritize health with respect to other goods.
Now we return to our question. Is daylight saving time working? Moving clocks forward in the spring and back again in the autumn is common across Europe and North America, meaning hundreds of millions of people still make the switch each year. But countries that do not observe daylight saving time make up a majority of the world. So the biannual clock change is far from a universal practice. Despite the fact that changing the time messes with our bodies and often our minds, we are strangely drawn to fiddling with the hands on the clock. But as the United States considers joining the countries that no longer change their clocks twice a year, it's clear that the effectiveness of daylight saving time depends largely on where you are in the world. You've been listening to The Inquiry from the BBC World Service. This edition was presented by me, Tanya Beckett. The producer was Matt Tolson, the researcher Eva Yabsley, the editor Tom Bigwood, the technical producer was Cameron Ward.
That was The Inquiry from the BBC.
Well, good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio One, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Manitoba YouTube page. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marcy Marcusa. It is Wednesday, August 19th, 12 degrees right now in Winnipeg, heading for a high today of 25 with a bit of a chance of showers later this morning. We'll have the details for you on that coming up. Let's say hello to the wonderful team helping put together today's show. Jenica Sewell is our studio technician, and Sierra Sanders is our studio director, and Travis Peterson is up bright and early for once to keep an eye on our YouTube page. Good morning to all of you. Let's also say good morning to Megan Ketchison, who is in now with a look at news headlines. Hello.
Hello. Well, the Manitoba Nurses Union says ER nurses from Dauphin have been forced to cover their own expenses to drive 100 kilometers to work to St. Rose de Lac. They've been making that trek since their own hospital closed due to flooding in July. Union President Darlene Jackson has spoken with 40 nurses from Dauphin who are very frustrated they're not being reimbursed. And in the first 15 months it's been operating, Manitoba's Commissioner for Teacher Professional Conduct received 94 complaints. It's the first annual report published since Noni Clausen was named the new commissioner for teacher professional conduct in May. Most of those reports came from employers. And we will have more at 6:30.
Thank you very much, Megan.
Thank you.
That is Megan Ketchison at your CBC News desk. Well, still lots to come here this first hour of Information Radio. As you've been hearing the news, of course, President Donald Trump pausing new tariffs on Canada for at least 3 days while Canada and U.S. finalizes the potential trade deal. We don't know what the details of that potential trade deal are, but coming up much later, we're going to get details on what this means and what this says about where Canada and U.S. relations are at coming up later in the show. But first, the Winnipeg Humane Society is temporarily pausing their intake of new animals. Up first on Information Radio, we're going to speak to a spokesperson from the Humane Society, but why it had to make that decision. That and much, much more coming up this first hour of Information Radio. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marcy Marcusa. Stay tuned.
Today on Q.
Laura Marling is known for writing introspective and deeply personal songs, but her latest album is a surprise. It's an entire record of covers featuring the music of one of Canada's most beloved children's entertainers, Raffi.
Baby beluga in the deep blue sea, you swim so wild and swim.
Q, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Is World Report. Good morning, I'm Mike Wise. U.S. President Donald Trump says the U.S. and Canada have reached a trade deal. Trump posting on social media late last night that new 50% tariffs on Canadian exports had been postponed for 3 days and that a proclamation had been signed. The new tariffs were set to kick in today. They'd have covered more than $28 billion worth of Canadian goods. The CBC's Chris Reyes joins me now from New York. So, Chris, what are we hearing from the White House?
So, Mike, in that proclamation signed by the president, the White House is confirming what Trump posted on social media and added that the pause is a result of Canada expressing a commitment to remove its own tariffs and restrictions on U.S. goods, including alcohol, dairy, and autos. So this is the part where we're very short on details at this point, including whether that commitment involves Canada putting American liquor back on store shelves, one of the issues that triggered the 50% tariff threat. Trump also suggested, with no details, on social media that the Keystone XL pipeline project may be revived as a result of these trade negotiations. This is the expansion that would have shipped Canadian crude to the U.S. President Joe Biden ended the project on his first day in office, and Trump posted an image of himself rescuing the pipeline. The White House proclamation made no mention of this detail.
Okay, well, what do we know in terms of sticking points, though?
Okay, so U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer said that more work still needs to be done and that the so-called deal will include comprehensive market access for all American goods, economic security commitments, and digital trade alignment. Greer said that this will both protect American partners and Canadian workers. But again, we're short on a lot of details over what exactly that entails. So there will likely be more intense closed-door negotiations in this very short 3-day window to get a final document that's signed by both parties.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
The CBC's Chris Reyes was in New York. Canada's description of where trade negotiations stand is a bit more ambiguous. Prime Minister Mark Carney's statement, released just before midnight, does not mention a deal, nor does it mention sectors like lumber, steel, and auto, which have been central to negotiations. The Prime Minister's statement reads, "Substantial progress has been made, although there is important work still to be done." The Prime Minister adds Canada remains focused on building a stronger, more independent and more competitive economy at home. Ottawa's top trade negotiator, Dominic LeBlanc, has been leading the talks in Washington. Right now, there's no word on whether he plans to stay until the new deadline, which is set for Saturday, 12:01 a.m. Eastern. Ukraine's former defense minister is calling for wartime elections. In a video posted online, Mikhailo Fedorov says his nation is facing a crisis of governance. Fedorov was fired by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky back in July, despite his popularity for advances on the front lines in the war against Russia. The CBC's Crystal Gamansing has the latest from London.
Демократія не може бути заручницею Росії.
Democracy can't be held hostage by Russia, says Mikhailo Fedorov. The video, released on YouTube yesterday, reminiscent of President Volodymyr Zelensky's nightly addresses, but with multiple camera angles and music. We are facing a systematic governance crisis, says the 35-year-old. Mikhailo had been one of Zelensky's trusted insiders, a strong, popular defense minister credited for improving efforts on the front lines. But since his firing in July, he has spoken out against the Ukrainian government and what he calls wartime corruption. General elections are currently prohibited as the country has been under martial law since the full-scale Russian invasion.
It might just bury the country.
Alexander Mereshko is a member of Zelensky's political party and chair of Ukraine's Foreign Affairs Committee.
Presidential elections, theoretically, they can be held, but we need changes in our legislation. Most importantly, politically, it's very dangerous because Putin will definitely use these this as a moment of kind of division.
He says despite Zelensky's term having ended in 2024, his presidential rating remains high. As for Fedorov, he says he should have been reinstated. Meanwhile, people are losing their lives. This morning in the southeastern city of Kherson, there was a deadly drone strike on a civilian bus. Olga spoke to the BBC about life in Kherson.
Every other minute, they are flying in different parts of the city. People survive. It's the only word which I can say. It's not life.
The inability to protect civilians wanting to go vote is one of the reasons given for Ukraine not changing the rules to allow for elections to go ahead. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
An Australian murder case that has captivated people around the world is back before a judge. Erin Patterson was convicted of killing 3 of her relatives by serving them beef Wellingtons laced with poisonous mushrooms. Her lawyers are now appealing her life sentence, arguing the trial had serious errors. Katie Silver has the latest details from Sydney.
Back at court after less than a year, Erin Patterson has always maintained her innocence in a case that's caught people's attention around the world. Now, in a 2-day hearing in Melbourne, her lawyers are trying to persuade 3 judges that her conviction should be overturned. They argued there were numerous miscarriages of justice in the first trial. They say, for example, Ms. Patterson was forced into speaking because the judge wouldn't allow certain photos into evidence. They claim there was a catastrophic blunder where the jury stayed in the same hotel as some prosecutors and a key witness during the trial. With the original trial lasting 11 weeks, Ben Livings, an associate professor of criminal law at Adelaide University, says Patterson's team has a big task on its hands.
It is a high bar. It's going to be very difficult for the defence to convince the appeal judges that not only kind of technically something that shouldn't have happened in the trial, but also that has led to a miscarriage of justice.
A verdict is not expected by the end of proceedings on Thursday. Katie Silver for CBC News, Sydney.
More than 5,000 cases of Ebola have been confirmed in the Democratic Republic of Congo. That's according to the latest government data. The DRC is facing its biggest Ebola epidemic in its history. The disease has killed more than 2,300 people. There is no approved vaccine or treatments for this rare strain, and the number of cases has grown exponentially since an outbreak was first declared back in May, though data from the World Health Organization suggests it was spreading as early as February. Response efforts to the outbreak have been hampered by a number of factors, including weak health infrastructure and community resistance. A treaty being negotiated by the BC government has some people worried they may lose access to a historic site near Victoria. Hatley Castle sits on Crown land and is a popular filming site for movie productions. It's one of several areas which could be transferred to First Nation ownership. As Katie DeRosa reports, officials say efforts are being made to keep the site open to the public.
It's an iconic landmark in Greater Victoria. Hatley Castle and the grounds around Royal Roads University have been used as a backdrop in the X-Men movies and Deadpool. It's the most high-profile piece of Crown land included in a treaty deal with 5 First Nations on Vancouver Island. The big question, though, is will this land remain public after it's transferred to the Songhees Nation? Public consultation documents say once those lands become treaty lands, there may be limited access or even no access for public use. Caroline Elliott is an academic specializing in Indigenous self-governance.
They are not guaranteed for ongoing public access.
Robert James, the lawyer for the Tama Treaty Association and the Songhees Nation, says the goal is to keep Hatley Castle open to the public.
Songhees is trying to do that in a way that is about being good neighbors.
James says once the federal land is transferred to the Songhees Nation, the university can then buy the land. The deal nears completion at a time when recent court cases in BC have increased the public's concern about Aboriginal title claims. Mario Canseco is a pollster and president of Research Co.
The skepticism about economic reconciliation is up by double digits.
No private land is included in the treaty talks, and it could be years before the deal is finalized. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Colwood, British Columbia.
And And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. One of the more popular stories on our website this morning is about dorm room makeovers. According to a TikTok trend, some U.S. students and their parents are spending thousands of dollars to hire interior designers to redo their college dorms, and of course, posting about the results to social media afterwards. You can find that on cbcnews.ca. I'm Mike Wise. This is CBC News.
My dorm room definitely did not get a makeover. I actually didn't live in a dorm room, but I lived in an apartment with a friend during university, and definitely not a very clean place. Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio One. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marcy Marcuse. Good to be with you. Coming up this hour on the show, Meta's big tobacco moment. Dozens of U.S. states are suing the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, claiming the platforms are addictive and harmful to kids. We're going to hear from an expert in tech ethics. Also, artificial intelligence giant Anthropic plans to digitally stamp or mark the content it cranks out for its users, and it's not the only company doing so. We're going to get more details on that. But first up here, the Winnipeg Humane Society is temporarily pausing their intake of new animals. Up first, here on Information Radio, we're going to speak to a spokesperson from the Humane Society about why it had to make that decision. But right now, though, at 6:11, let's check in with Megan Ketchison with a look at news headlines. Hello.
Hello. Well, a Dauphin resident says she's relieved the province will bring back ER services soon. In early July, a major downpour flooded the Dauphin Hospital. The facility has been closed for about 7 weeks. Premier Wab Kinew now says a temporary emergency department will start seeing patients by Labor Day. And dozens of people gathered in Vimy Park in Winnipeg last night to remember the sacrifices made by soldiers during the Dieppe raid and beyond. The event was held at the exact time that more than 500 members of the Queen's Own Cameron Highlanders landed under heavy German fire. Hundreds were injured, 78 died. And I'll have more coming up at 6:30.
Thank you very much, Megan.
Thank you.
That is Megan Ketchison at your CBC News desk. Right now in Winnipeg, we are sitting at 12, warming up to 25 today. And even though yesterday I talked about how it's just pretty much a sunny forecast ahead, there actually is now a bit of a chance of rain today. So today it's sunny. It's sunny now as that sun slowly sets, but you can expect increasing cloudiness near noon today, then about a 30% chance of showers late this afternoon, and maybe some fog patches dissipating this morning as well. And then tonight, we're going to expect some mainly cloudy conditions, but also about a 30% chance of showers overnight. But then tomorrow, forecast is 23 and mainly cloudy here in Winnipeg. We'll get more details in your regional forecast later this hour. But right now, though, let's check in with Sierra Sanders, who is in with a look at your morning commute. Hello.
Hi, Corey. Pretty quiet so far on this morning commute, not hearing about too much going on out there. No major situations or backups that I'm aware of at this moment. But I will say I feel like I wore the right thing this morning. I wore jeans and a sweater. I was ready.
I also finally actually wore pants to work today. I usually wear something, but it's shorts. But I wore full pants today.
Full length pants. Not
today.
no shorter shorts or anything like that.
Yeah, no, because the bike ride has been chilly. Actually,
it's been chilly. Yeah,
I
was walking to my car this morning and I was pretty happy with my choice that I wore a sweater and a long sleeve.
Almost wish I wore gloves actually too. My hands are cold.
Okay, all right. So yeah, it's getting chilly out there. The nights are getting a little bit colder now that we're heading into mid-August, I should say. But yeah, so far back to the commute, not too much going on out there. But if that does change throughout the morning, no matter how you're getting around and no matter where you are here in Manitoba, I'd love to hear from you. So give me a call on that CBC commuter line. That number's 204-788-3093.
Well, as mentioned, the Winnipeg Humane Society is temporarily freezing their intake of all animals. In a Facebook post yesterday, they said the freeze is to prioritize, quote, critically sick and injured animals, unquote. I'm joined now by Carly Peters on Zoom. She's the Director of Communications and Marketing for the Winnipeg Humane Society. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So what are the factors that led to this decision?
In July, we brought in over 500 animals into care. And in this month, we saw, another 324, 250 of those being cats and kittens. And we have been seeing more sick and injured animals, which not only take up space in the shelter, it also takes up, staff resources. So right now, our holding in the back is so full that we are having to put some cats and kittens into the adoption rooms. And then that looks like, the clinic staff right off the hop, they are stretched in terms of initially taking care of these animals. But then, the responsibility falls to our animal care team who have to, care for all these animals daily. A lot of them require medication and other help, as well as our behavior team. So, when we're this overwhelmed in terms of lack of space and capacity, we just have to pause intakes. We still will take sick and injured animals, but even under our triage policy, we've raised that to critically sick and injured animals.
And how often do you usually have to pause intakes in a given year?
It seems to become more frequently. I don't think we've done an actual intake freeze for about a year and a bit. But it's been a struggle. It's, as most rescues will tell you right now, everyone's been at capacity. Everybody has been stretched thin for a really long time. And we just hit a breaking point, and we need to catch up. We need to care for the animals that we have with us.
And why are you seeing such an influx of so many sick and injured animals in particular? Are you noticing a trend in the nature of the illness or injuries at all?
In the last couple of weeks, we've had a lot of discussions about seeing increase in owner surrenders because of unable to afford the vet care. A lot of preventative medicine. People might not be able to access vaccines and things. So we have, seen puppies with parvo, which is can be a very deadly disease. It's very contagious. So all of those puppies, they have to go into isolation, which requires our staff to be dressed in full PPE in order to care for them. Things like our number one, we see with cats. Cats are our largest volume of animals coming in right now. We're seeing a lot of blocked cats. So that's urinary blockages. Also, deadly disease or a deadly ailment that can be quite expensive to treat. So we're just finding a lot of these owner surrenders that are coming in. Animals are sick and injured because the vet care has just gone up so much.
And in terms of the cost on your end to take in and care for these animals, tell me a little bit about what it usually costs for you.
Yeah, so we kind of say on average a day, a healthy cat will cost us, on average about $50. So a healthy cat, when it comes into the shelter, its length of stay can just be, several days that they proceed through. So that's, $200 to $300 for a healthy cat. And so now we're seeing these animals come in, the cost, rises in terms of medication and length of stay and all those other factors. We do have some external funding, but it's really a drop in the bucket when it comes to the volume of cats we're seeing. Last year, we took in over 4,100 cats and kittens alone, 6,000 animals in total. So we heavily rely on the support of our community to keep our clinic open, keep our shelter going, and help those animals.
And one way, obviously, to create capacity for you guys is to get animals adopted. I was looking at your website right now, and actually currently there's only 9 cats, 6 dogs, and 1 rabbit available for adoption on your website. So if you're over capacity, why are there so few adoptions right now?
Yeah. So it's kind of like if you want to think of like a pipeline. So, right now we have so many animals that coming into care that need help, and we only have so much time and resources to, treat those animals medically. A lot of them will need extra time to, heal, which either means, they're in shelter healing or they're in foster homes. And, once they're ready to be adopted, then they go to the adoption floor. So, touch base with us in a couple weeks and we're going to be at capacity in adoption. But because of the volume of animals, we are really trying to work through those spay and neuters, those vetting to make sure that animals are healthy and ready to go to their forever home. So, that's where we sort of also need to catch up. We have a lot of dogs on the adoption floor that aren't on the website, but they can have interested parties. We call them open selection, but they're just waiting for their spay and neuter. That's all they're waiting for before they can find their forever home. But because we have such a high volume of animals that do require medical care, our clinic is just backed up. So that is, again, a reason why we are pausing, intake is so our back end can catch up so the animals can proceed to the front part.
And what needs to happen before you can actually lift this intake freeze?
We're going to have to get the numbers down in holding. One of the ways, the public can help is, apply to be a foster. Like I mentioned, once these animals are stable or they've had their treatment, but they still need some time to heal. It's great to have that happen in a temporary loving foster home. And so while those animals are out in care, that means we can open up space to bring in more animals. So that's one thing that we're hoping to see is, people coming in and helping a little bit in terms of fosters. We're still seeing a lot of kittens, bottle babies, which require a lot of long-term care. So if people are interested in learning about fostering and helping in that way, they can go to our website at winnipeghumanesociety.ca.
We also happened to have you on last week as well because you were also talking about the rising number of pet surrenders being seen by the Winnipeg Humane Society. So it's a compounding issue. How much of that contributing to this issue on top of the amount of sick animals coming in?
Yeah, well, so mainly most of the sick animals that are coming in are owner surrenders. When I'm looking at August numbers of the 324 that came in, 120 were owner surrenders. So compound that, yes, with the strays, which be about, the other sort of half of that. It just continues to put pressure on our shelter. And, we don't make these decisions lightly. Like, we understand that, surrendering an animal is a tragic experience. Most people, like their family members, and we're really hoping to find other solutions for people to ensure that like surrendering is their last resort. So we do, while we were on our intake freeze, we do still have our community support programs. So we're encouraging people, if they're struggling with, food scarcity, we have a pet food bank. If it's a behavior issue, we have a free behavior helpline. So, our goal is to keep people and their pets together and keep animals out of the shelter.
And finally here, your Facebook also mentioned your teams are being stretched incredibly thin. So what sort of emotional impact is this having on staff?
A lot, burnout in rescue is real. I know all the other rescues and shelters in the province can probably attest to that. We are in the business in the sector to help animals, and and it's hard when we see so many coming in. There's only so many hours in the day, and everyone is working really hard to keep people and their pets together and care for the animals that come into our shelter and find them forever homes. But there doesn't seem to be an end in sight. And I think sometimes that's really hard for everyone. And so it's these small steps like the intake freeze that we try to give our staff a little bit of a reprieve to catch up. But it's tough. If I'm being honest, it's tough. Everyone is feeling being stretched.
Well, Carly, thanks for your time this morning. I know it's precious, so thank you.
Thank you so much.
Carly Peters is the Director of Communications and Marketing for the Winnipeg Humane Society.
I'm Jura McElraith, your local reporter for CBC Manitoba in Steinbach. You're listening to CBC Radio One.
6:24 right now, and up next on the show, here's a question you're probably finding yourself asking all the time these days. Is it AI generated? It's a common enough question these days. Everyone from professors to writing prize juries seem to be working through it. One of the world's biggest artificial intelligence companies, Anthropic, is taking a step towards providing an answer. After a push by the European Union, the company says it plans to digitally stamp or mark material generated through the use of Claude, its AI platform. CBC's Manjula Selvarajah looks at what the move means for users.
It's invisible, but it may just change how people use artificial intelligence. Anthropic, the company behind the AI platform Claude, says it plans to add a watermark to content generated on its platform. Unlike the often talked about signs of AI that people look for, like multiple M dashes in an essay or a strangely bent arm in a photo, this digital signal will not be detectable by the human eye, but an AI detector looking for such a watermark can find it. Renji Butilit says he and others watching this space could see the announcement coming. Butilit is co-founder and director of the Montreal AI Ethics Institute, a not-for-profit focused on increasing society's knowledge of the ethics of AI.
I wasn't surprised given the EU AI Act made it mandatory as of August 2nd.
Butilit is talking about the European Union Artificial Intelligence Act. Article 50 of the Act spells out transparency obligations for AI companies operating in the EU. The Act passed the European Parliament in 2024, but the transparency obligations came into effect this August. Now, Anthropic has decided to comply beyond EU borders, going global with their change. So it will affect Canadians, even though there are no policies in Canada or the US pushing for this kind of disclosure. Anthropic isn't the only one that's signed on. So have OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, Meta, Canada's Cohere, and many others.
It's a step in the right direction, right? And the principle of disclosure when it comes to the use of AI, like it makes sense. As a consumer, I would want to know when I'm interacting with or music that's been generated by AI or even text to an extent.
Here's how the watermark works. When anything visual is created on Claude, the platform will add a digital fingerprint of sorts to them. AI detectors can spot these stamps, but it's a bit more complicated with text. Conventionally, when crafting a sentence, Claude uses its training to figure out the next appropriate word. If it has multiple choices like big versus large versus huge, it uses a random approach to pick one of these choices. With watermarking, it would apply a particular key to choose that next word. So when a detection algorithm studies the essay, it'll spot that key throughout the work. The longer the output, the more the key is used, therefore making the work more detectable. It's much harder for detection algorithms to spot the key within shorter content. So longer pieces, copy and pasted from AI, retyped as is, or translated from one language to another on the platform, would be easy to identify. Florian Kirschbaum is a professor at the School of Computer Science at the University of Waterloo.
And if I make very little edits, the watermark is extremely safe.
As he explains, simply taking an essay and changing the occasional word here or there won't remove the mark. The user would have to rewrite it significantly.
Sentence-level watermarks are much harder to remove. A sentence has meaning, and you need to change the meaning of that sentence in order to remove the watermark.
Anthropic says watermarking will be included with any new model of Claude released now, after August 2nd. Older models of Claude will start watermarking by December of this year because of a grace period provided by the legislation. Anthropic is yet to release a bot to detect the text watermark, but when it does, it aims to make it publicly available.
So the problem is, if you make a verification mechanism absolutely publicly available, here's what I do. I take the text that I just generated. I make one very small edit. I run it through it. It says watermark. I make another very small edit, right? I run through it and do it until the watermark is gone.
Renji Butilid has a warning for institutions and others waiting to use the watermark detectors.
When a watermark is detected, it should trigger a conversation rather than punishment. And that should be the standard, right? And, the bare minimum should be not to make any adverse high-stakes decisions based solely on a watermark alone.
The Anthropic announcement kicked off a debate on multiple Reddit threads. Some users on Reddit are already thinking of ways to get around the watermark. A few users wrote of the irony of AI putting its mark on content it generates when it was trained on the work of hundreds of thousands of humans who don't have a chance to put their mark on the same piece. What is certain is that the debate over what is AI generated and what isn't will continue. For CBC Radio, I'm Manjula Selvarajah.
Thanks, Manjula. Time now for your CBC News from Manitoba.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Megan Ketchison in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it's mainly clear and 12, sunny with increasing cloud today, chance of showers, and a high of 25. The U.S. is claiming it has struck a last-minute deal with Canada, avoiding punishing new tariffs on Canadian goods. President Donald Trump had given the two sides until midnight Eastern Time Wednesday morning to get a deal done, or have Canada face 50% tariffs on select products totaling $20 billion. The CBC's Ashley Burke reports on how Canada is viewing the pending new deal.
Prime Minister Mark Carney said substantial progress has been made, although there is important work still to be done. Adding, while we continue this work, Canada remains focused on building a stronger, more independent and more competitive economy at home. Now, he has said that this is the way to be in a strong position at the table and that he's been preparing for all possible scenarios. We know the government has been working on a plan to respond if Trump hits Canada with these new tariffs, and likely still will be, since at this point, this is only a 3-day pause. Earlier this summer, the Prime Minister said that he didn't see the value in holding back energy exports to the U.S., including Alberta's oil, because it's important for Canada to be known as a reliable supplier. A member of his advisory committee, Erin O'Toole, said that they need to look at options that don't hurt national unity or Canada's economy, like potentially bringing back the digital services tax that Donald Trump does not like. But how the government responds will really depend on if Trump still hits Canada with new tariffs after that pause.
The CBC's Ashley Burke in Ottawa. Manitoba nurses welcome the government's plan to open a temporary emergency room in Dauphin. The hospital there has been closed since the basement flooded in early July. Manitoba Nurses Union President Darlene Jackson says ER nurses from Dauphin are making the long trek to provide emergency services in St. Rose-de-Lac, and they're not getting paid for their travel expenses.
We are in discussions with the employer right now on how to fairly compensate those nurses that are traveling 120 kilometers. Do you expect someone to pay their own gas to drive an extra 120 kilometers to go to work when they live 5 minutes from the hospital?
Jackson had a recent Zoom call with about 40 nurses from Dauphin who are frustrated they're not being reimbursed. And emergency medical services are returning to Dauphin in less than 3 weeks. And that's the promise from Manitoba's government, who wants to open a temporary ER by Labor Day. A major downpour flooded the city's hospital, forcing it to close in early July. Dauphin resident Susan Teely says not having an ER in the city for weeks has been scary.
We don't have anywhere close to run to. That's always in the back of your mind, right? And my neighbor's had a stroke before, and his wife is saying, just like, oh my gosh, you better not have another stroke. You better not. What'll we do?
Premier Wab Kinew says the temporary ER will be staffed like any other emergency department in the province. It will be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In the first 15 months it has been operating, Manitoba's Commissioner for Teacher Professional Conduct has received 94 complaints about teacher misconduct. It's the first annual report published since Noni Clausen was named the new Commissioner for Teacher Professional Conduct in May, and it's the first full reporting period since the office was launched in January of last year. 53 of the complaints came from employers, 27 from the public. Complaints first head to a preliminary review, which then can lead to an investigation, then a hearing. A newcomer to Canada says he's thankful he found himself in a southeast Manitoba city. Cuban refugee claimant Lazaro Emilio Aero Rio Navarro, found himself in Steinbach, a community where he had no connections. Not knowing where to go and in transitional housing, he connected with the Eastman Immigrant Services. Ricio Navarro spoke with CBC News through a Spanish translator.
Bueno, hasta hoy nunca había recibido este servicio en Canadá.
So he's saying this is the first time he received help. He is in shock because he has been in different places in Canada, and this is the first time that someone is taking care of him.
EIS settlement facilitator Sarah Simbi-Nakure helped Ricio Navarro find permanent housing and other supports. In the last year, EIS has helped 11 other families in similar situations. He plans to take English classes and start working in the community. And dozens of people gathered in Bimini Park in Winnipeg last night to remember sacrifices by soldiers during the Dieppe raid and beyond. The event was held at the exact time the more than 500 members of the Queen's Own Cameron Highlanders landed under heavy German fire. Hundreds were injured, 78 died. Half of the predominantly Canadian troops were killed, and it's remembered as one of the bloodiest days for Canadians in the Second World War. Hugh O'Donnell is a member of the Highlanders. He says it's events like this that are important.
That we haven't forgotten them. The guys who went, the guys who came home, the guys who came home broken, we're recognized that now as PTSD. At the time, well, he's just another fellow who had a bad war. And that we continue to do so.
O'Donnell says despite Dieppe raid happening 84 years ago, there was at least one family member of a person who was there at the memorial. And that's the CBC News from Winnipeg. You can always find more on our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you very much, Megan.
Thank you.
That is Megan Ketchison at your CBC News Desk. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio One. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marcy Marcusa. Well, let's take a look at your regional forecast now. Starting here in Winnipeg, we're sitting at 12. Right now, warming up to 25 today, but we're going to see increasing cloudiness throughout the day around noon, and then the 30% chance of showers later this afternoon, dipping down to 15 overnight, then warming up to 23 tomorrow, and it's going to be mainly cloudy. Out west in Brandon right now, you're sitting at 8. Similar forecast, mix of sun and clouds today, 30% chance of showers this afternoon, but you also have a risk of a thunderstorm as well. Going down to 10 overnight with about a 30% chance of showers, and warming up to 27 tomorrow. In Dauphin, you're sitting at 8 right now, warming up to 22 with about a 30% chance of showers. And thunderstorms as well this afternoon, dipping down to 11 overnight with a chance of showers. And then tomorrow, your high is 25 and mainly sunny. In Dauphin right now, in Thompson right now, quite cold. It's only 1 right now in Thompson, and you are warming up to 20 today, though, dipping down to 12 overnight, and then Thursday, tomorrow, high of 23 with a 60% chance of showers. Well, let's check in now with Sierra Sanders, who's in with a look at your commute. Hello.
Hi, Corey. You probably saw me come in with a piece of paper, so you think, oh, you have a traffic tip. I actually don't have a traffic tip. I have a fashion tip for Corey, or maybe not fashion tip. I should say fashion suggestion for Corey. Ray gave me a call.
Okay.
And he said, well, has Corey ever thought about convertible pants?
I have thought. I owned tear-offs when I was like 8, or zip-offs when I was 8. But.
Yeah, and that's what I immediately thought of. But he said, no, the convertible pants that he's talking about, which he has a couple of pairs, so he can attest to this. Okay. It's the pants, and then in the afternoon when it gets warm, you just zip off the bottoms.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think that's what he was suggesting.
Okay. I mean, if there was a season for those pants.
It would be now.
It would be now.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that if I bought them, my wife would be unimpressed.
Would she make fun of you?
Potentially. Yes. Yeah. I think there would be some birding jokes in there, potentially, kind of thing. So.
But I feel like, they could have multiple uses.
Yeah.
That's how I always justify things.
I mean, it's practical. It makes sense. But,
exactly.
maybe I'll try a pair and see what my
So yeah,
says.
Ray was suggesting convertible pants for you. So I didn't have a traffic tip, but I had a fashion suggestion. So this might be the fashion suggestion line now for Corey at this point.
Which I need plenty of.
Yeah, there we go. I mean, I could maybe use some too. Who knows? I'd be happy to hear from you, because that's the theme of the commuter line so far this week, Corey. It's been pretty quiet out there. I'm not hearing about any major disruptions or any major situations going on out there. But I would love to hear from you if that is changing while you're out there, no matter how you are getting around and no matter where you are here in Manitoba. I'd love to hear from you. So give me a call on that CBC commuter line or fashion suggestion line at this point. But we'll stick with the commuter line. I'd love to hear from you. Give me a call. That number's 204-788-3093.
Thank you very much, Sierra. That's Sierra Sanders, CBC's studio director. Let's pivot now to Neil Herland, who's here with your business report. Hi there.
Good morning. I'm wearing full pants, not the tearaway kind.
Okay, but have you ever tried the tearaways or the zip-offs?
You know, they remind me too much of what the Chippendales used to wear. I don't know if you know what the Chippendales are.
Yes.
They were big in the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I am aware. Well, let's pivot now to something entirely different. U.S. President Donald Trump is pausing his threat of 50% tariffs against Canada. As you've been hearing in the news now, it's for 3 days. But Trump and Prime Minister Carney are actually using very different language around it. So to just break that down for us.
Yeah, Corey, U.S. President Donald Trump is using the word deal, suggesting that an agreement between the two countries is imminent. But Prime Minister Mark Carney is using more cautious language. In a post last night, Trump said the so-called deal is subject to the finalization of documents. He even teases the possibility of reviving the Keystone XL pipeline, which would have brought Alberta oil to Nebraska. The U.S. Trade Rep Jameson Greer is even more optimistic. In a statement last night, he said, "Congratulations, Mr. President. The deal will include comprehensive market access for all American goods, economic security commitments, and many important provisions." Now let's compare that with the statement issued late last night by Carney. Carney said substantial progress has been made, although there is important work still to be done. And Carney ends his statement by saying that Canada remains focused on building a stronger, more independent, and more competitive economy at home, which certainly sounds like his government has a plan B if things don't work out with Washington this week. Now, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce is also reacting. President and CEO Candice Lang says businesses may not be closing up shop with this news, but an extension doesn't bring the certainty that a signed interim deal would. She adds this limbo state is not anyone's preferred outcome. Time is of the essence.
We're also hoping to hear from the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce later in the show as well to get a local perspective. Next up here, some idled Canadian auto plants could get a new life, but what industry could take over?
Well, defense companies could potentially convert auto factories and hire those skilled assembly plant workers. Canada and its NATO allies in Europe are on a spending spree, and two Canadian defense companies are in the spotlight. The armored vehicle maker Rochelle in Brampton, Ontario, just outside Toronto, and Dominion Dynamics based in Ottawa. They're both eyeing shuttered auto workers and factories. Just the other day, I mentioned the automaker Stellantis is warning it might have to permanently close or sell its plant in Brampton. It was supposed to make the Jeep Compass vehicle until the trade war broke out between Canada and the U.S. That production line moved south of the border. Now those Stellantis workers could potentially be making military vehicles. Canada hopes to spend 5% of its GDP on defense within the next 10 years, and this could help achieve that.
And finally here, a British Columbia startup is developing technology to help people escape wildfires. How does it work?
Yeah, the company is called IntelliMass Technologies, and it started after the devastating wildfires that hit West Kelowna, BC 3 years ago. A local resident named Chris Stewart had to evacuate quickly, and he needed to drive through unpaved country back roads, so he developed a system called Backroad Intel. It collects data from sensors and dash cams of local vehicles. Then it feeds it to other drivers to identify flames, smoke, and road conditions. It overlays the data on a map of an evacuation zone. All of this gets funneled into an app so that other drivers can get live information on the best escape routes. Think of it as Waze for wildfires, powered by artificial intelligence and a network of evacuees sharing information in real time. The company IntelliMass is still figuring out how to make a profit from this technology, but as we see across across Canada this summer and previous summers, wildfires are a growing threat, and this brings a solution that could potentially save lives.
Fascinating. Well, Neil, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Corey.
That's Neil Herland with your business news. Well, let's stay on that potential trade deal between Canada and the U.S. A trade crisis is averted for now. As mentioned, President Donald Trump says a deal is in place and is pausing the 50% tariffs on Canadian goods for 3 days. But Prime Minister Mark Carney is much less certain, saying, quote, there is still important work to be done. So there are a lot of questions. And here for more on that is CBC's Peter Armstrong.
You can imagine the sigh of relief that emanated from small businesses and office towers and boardrooms right across the country when Trump announced that he would pause for 3 days the latest tranche of tariffs that he was threatening to impose on Canadian goods because he says there's a deal. But it didn't take long for that relief to morph into anxiety over what might be in this deal. We still don't really know very much. Trump says there's a deal. That's a deal that's subject to the finalization of documents. Prime Minister Mark Carney also issued a statement that was much more circumspect. He says that substantial progress was being made, but that there is important work still to be done. Meanwhile, Trump's trade representative, who brokered this deal, had some more detail in a statement that he made, saying this will include comprehensive market access for American goods, economic security commitments, digital trade alignment, and many important provisions that will continue to protect our market, American workers, along with our Canadian partners. But that's not a lot of detail either. White House documents, for example, would only say it's a proclamation, an official proclamation that ends the threat of these tariffs for 3 days. It talks about the booze ban that has been the subject of much anger in the United States. And without saying specifically what was agreed to, the White House published this proclamation that seems to say that irritant has been resolved. The problem there, of course, is that those booze bans are put in place by the provinces. And they've said repeatedly that they would stay in place until the existing sectoral tariffs. Those are the tariffs that are already in place on steel and aluminum and autos and lumber. And the provinces have said they won't get rid of those booze bans until those are addressed. And those tariffs have caused much damage, much economic damage across the country. They're not mentioned, not by the USTR, not in the White House proclamation, not by Donald Trump, and not by Mark Carney. I reached out to Dan Kelly from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business to ask his take on what this all means. And he said, and I'll quote here, if the U.S. removes the 50% tariff and approves Keystone Pipeline, which was also mentioned by Donald Trump, those are two big moves in the right direction and will provide some short-term relief to many small firms. But he went on to say, we need to see if progress was made on the existing sectoral tariffs to fully evaluate any overall interim deal. So that's the big question mark this morning. That's something we'll hopefully get information on as the day progresses. But look, the worst of the outcomes has been avoided, but there's still a lot of questions. And it's only a 3-day pause. So a new deal now looms on Friday.
That's CBC's Chris Armstrong. And still ahead, coming up later in the show. Oh, Peter Armstrong, sorry. That is CBC's Peter Armstrong. But still ahead, coming up, we are hoping to hear from the Manitoba Chamber of Commerce, to hear a local perspective on what this 3-day pause will mean for Manitoba businesses. Well, next up here on the show, we've got the latest song from Winnipeg band Big Loser. On social media, they've summed up what the song is about. It says, quote, a couple flies south for vacation, only the plane makes it. Here it is. This is Big Loser with Julia on CBC Radio One.
Julia shuffles her feet to the window seat. Julia, an untimely trip to Kyoto. Is it early to go, Julia? Julia, my friends think I'm mad. Said it's early for that, Julia. As we detach from the earth below, I feel I truly know you, Julia. As the turbulence grows, conversation dance around a night with a man. Julia, you swindled me as soon as we began. Is caught in a lie, tries to rationalize. Julia, an untimely point for the hostess to bring a bag of pretzels and drinks. Julia, I got visions of you double dealing in nude. Julia, simultaneously, I wanna know it all and nothing at all. Julia, as the turbulence grows, a conversation dance around the night with the man. Julia, you swindled me as soon as we began. Stretch its toes to the land below. Julia, as the aircraft rapidly slows, I feel I don't know you, Julia.
That was Winnipeg band Big Loser with their new song, Julia, about what I assume is about a breakup on an airplane. Well, 6:50 right now, and next up here on the show, if you use social media at all, you know the ability to endlessly scroll with videos playing automatically is part of the experience. But features like those are now at the center of the biggest ever lawsuit against social media giant Meta. Starting this week, 29 U.S. states are in court arguing that Facebook and Instagram are addicting and harming kids, and that those harms are baked into how the platforms were designed. And for more on this, we're joined by Ibrahim Bagheri. He is a professor at the Faculty of Information at the University of Toronto, and he joins us now from Toronto. Good morning.
Hi, Corey.
So this lawsuit has been called a landmark case for Facebook. What makes it so significant?
For us to understand why this is so important at this time, we need to really understand how these social media platforms operate and what that, operation model is related to the lawsuit. So these social media platforms basically operate on the so-called attention economy, right? They want the users to spend as much time as possible on the platform. The more the users spend time on the platform, the more likely it is for the platform to be able to show them paid content or advertising. And so the more advertising that gets shown to the user, the higher the revenue the company makes and the higher the value the company becomes. Now, to achieve this, social media platforms have been building for many years now what they call algorithmic engagement, trying to optimize engagement of users with the platforms. What the lawsuit now claims is that these algorithms are not just recommendation algorithms that increase your engagement with the platforms, but rather they have now become addictive features. And therefore, the users are not there because they like the content. It's because the users have now become addicted to the platform, and that's why they are on the platform. If the lawsuit is successful in what it's asking for, there's a fine and there's a requirement to change how the platforms operate. If the lawsuit is successful in enforcing and getting the ruling to enforce that the platforms change their model, this means that not only that the platforms have to change the technical infrastructure, the algorithms, the recommendation models, and so on, but also would require the platforms to rethink their revenue generation model, right? Because if you're not maximizing users' time on the platform, therefore that's going to hit directly the platform's revenue. And so they have to rethink the whole business model.
Now, Meta says there's no proof that its platforms are directly responsible for harm suffered by kids. How strong is the evidence that these features are harmful?
Right. So, if depends on who you ask. People might tell you that the evidence is not conclusive. Based on, my knowledge, there's ample evidence to show there's direct association, and this has been, widely documented in the relevant literature. And I will give you just a few quick examples, right? So there's a widely known study called the UK Millennial Cohort Study that looked at close to 11,000 14-year-old kids and found that heavier social media use is directly associated with greater depressive symptoms. There's another longitudinal study published in Lancet Child that shows, again, similar pattern. Frequent social media use is a strong predictor for poorer mental health and well-being outcomes. What these studies and studies similar to these suggest is that the more you spend time on these platforms, the more likely it is that you encounter cyberbullying, online harassment, the less likely it is you have enough time for sleep, for physical activity, which in turn leads to poorer mental health and well-being. To add to that, there's just a very recent study published in Nature Human Behavior that looked at 5,000 Italian students. And what they found was that kids who were exposed to social media in grades 6 or 7, they were far more likely to score poorer on math and language compared to their counterparts who were exposed to social media in grades 9 and later. So I think there's ample evidence to show there is a negative correlation between social network use and, helpful mental health and well-being outcomes, and also things like schoolwork.
So if these states are successful in suing Meta and Meta is found guilty, obviously that hasn't been tested in court yet, they also want the company to change its platform to make them less addictive to kids. So it's not just a monetary compensation. So this could mean getting rid of things like infinite scroll, autoplay, algorithmic recommendations. Would you support those kind of changes to social media?
Yeah. This is exactly, I think, the right request from the courts, because let's say if the states are successful in court, a monetary fine wouldn't really solve any problem, because the platforms are then incentivized to even, to do more engagement optimization so that they cover not only the fine, but also increase their revenue. So the request coming from the states, I think, is the right one, to get the platforms to rethink their algorithmic approach to the user engagement. Because what is happening right now is that the users have basically become objects of optimizations themselves. So when you're on the platform, it's not really clear whether the content you're seeing is the content you're seeing because you're interested in it, or it's content you're seeing because the platform thinks by showing you that content, it will get you to stay on the platform longer, right? And if you're in your development ages, which the teens are, it's going to basically shape, the algorithmic recommendations are going to basically shape your values and interests and your identity. And obviously, you don't want an algorithmic platform to determine what our teenagers think about and how their identities are shaped.
And we just got less than a minute here, but before we go, what could this mean for Canada? Would this just be changes in the States if something does come of this?
Right. So, as you know, and the listeners probably know, Canada's been toying around with this idea of a legislation banning social media use for teenagers for a bit now. It hasn't become law yet or anything like that. It's just being under consideration. But I think the main reason this is being considered in Canada is this addictive piece of these social media platforms and how it's impacting teenagers. If this lawsuit is successful in changing how these platforms operate, I think the urgency for banning social media within Canada will probably be less urgent, and regulation around it would look much different.
Well, Ibrahim, thank you very much for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Corey.
Ibrahim Bagheri is a professor at the University of Toronto. Well, time now for quick headlines with Megan Ketchison.
Well, a Manitoba Nurses Union says ER nurses from Dauphin have been forced to cover their own expenses to drive 100 kilometers and back to work in St. Rose de Lac. We'll have more at 7:30.
Well, coming up, we're going to hear how Winnipeggers feel about the U.S. booze possibly coming back to Canadian shelves. It's a bargaining chip in the ongoing U.S.-Canada trade negotiations with the tariffs paused for 3 days. We're going to hear from Winnipeggers in Osborne Village as they come out of the LC there. Stay tuned for that. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marcy Marcusa. We'll be back after World Report. Stay tuned.
Today on The Current.
I'm Lindsay Duncombe. If you've spent any time on Atlantic Canada's coast this summer, there's a chance you came close to a white shark.
All of the sharks that come from south come up through this corridor.
We'll talk about what people should know about interacting with sharks as more and more appear in Canada. That's coming out on The Current.
The Current, this morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Mike Wise. Canadian trade officials have a little more time to find common ground with their U.S. counterparts. U.S. President Donald Trump says he is issuing a 3-day pause on plans to slap Canada with 50% tariffs. Trump claims a deal has been made, it just needs to be finalized. Canada, though, is playing its cards a bit closer to its chest. With me from Ottawa to break down what we know about these talks, the CBC's Rafi Boudjikanian. Rafi, to start, what did Prime Minister Mark Carney's statement say, and perhaps more importantly, what was left unsaid?
Indeed, Mike, the tone from that statement is way less bombastic than read. Substantial progress has been made, although there is important work still to be done. While we continue this work, Canada remains focused on building a stronger, more independent, and more competitive economy at home. So the word deal does not even appear there, much less any specific mention of the outstanding issues for Canadians, namely existing tariffs on auto, aluminum, steel, or softwood lumber. We know, of course, that drastically lowering or getting rid of those is a major goal for Ottawa, and they were unhappy with Washington's proposals on that front so far. So that's where their efforts will be focused.
Okay. So, Rafi, the U.S. has made it clear that it expects Canada to make concessions. So where could we expect Carney to give ground? But what's that actually going to mean for him politically as well?
Yeah, the Americans are looking to have their liquor brands return to store shelves in this country. Most provinces have banned the sale of U.S. booze in response to sectoral tariffs. They also want concessions in the auto sector, more access to the dairy market, and all this with a prime minister who built his brand on standing up to Donald Trump. It's basically how Mark Carney salvaged a win for the Liberals in the federal election last year after taking the party over from Justin Trudeau. And though another one is years away, some Canadians are going to the polls much sooner in by-elections at the end of this month in BC, Ontario, and Quebec. And in that last one, especially in the rural riding of Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord, we're seeing a pretty competitive race where the Bloc Québécois is trying to make hay on potential concessions regarding dairy or even the lack of protections for workers in the forestry sector. So the timing of all this could be rough for the Prime Minister right before a return to Parliament, Mike.
Okay, thanks, Rafi.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Rafi Boudjikanian in Ottawa. Ukraine's former defense minister is calling for wartime elections. In a video posted online, Mikhailo Fedorov says his nation is facing a crisis of governance. Fedorov was fired by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky back in July, despite his popularity for advances on the front lines in the war against Russia. The CBC's Crystal Gamansing has the latest from London.
Демократія не може бути заручницею Росії.
Democracy can't be held hostage by Russia, says Mikhailo Fedorov.
The video, released on YouTube yesterday, reminiscent of President Volodymyr Zelensky's nightly addresses, but with multiple camera angles and music. We are facing a systematic governance crisis, says the 35-year-old. Mikhailo had been one of Zelensky's trusted insiders, a strong, popular defense minister credited for improving efforts on the front lines. But since his firing in July, he has spoken out against the Ukrainian government and what he calls wartime corruption. General elections are currently prohibited as the country has been under martial law since the full-scale Russian invasion.
It might just bury the country.
Alexander Mereshko is a member of Zelensky's political party and chair of Ukraine's Foreign Affairs Committee.
Presidential elections, theoretically, they can be held, but we need changes in our legislation. Most importantly, politically, it's very dangerous because Putin will definitely use this as a moment of kind of division.
He says despite Zelensky's term having ended in 2024, his presidential rating remains high. As for Fedorov, he says he should have been reinstated. Meanwhile, people are losing their lives. This morning in the southeastern city of Kherson, there was a deadly drone strike on a civilian bus. Olga spoke to the BBC about life in Kherson.
Every other minute, they are flying in different parts of the city. People survive. It's the only word which I can say. It's not life.
The inability to protect civilians wanting to go vote is one of the reasons given for Ukraine not changing the rules to allow for elections to go ahead. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
Croatian police have arrested a Ukrainian man on behalf of Germany. Prosecutors allege the man, a trained scuba diver, helped plant bombs on the Nord Stream pipelines. The undersea pipes delivering Russian gas to Germany were damaged by explosions in 2022, several months after Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. German authorities say it was an attempt to sabotage Moscow's ability to fund the war. Kyiv has denied any involvement. A former Ukrainian army officer was also arrested in Italy last year in connection with the blasts. An Australian murder case that has captivated people around the world is back before a judge. Erin Patterson was convicted of killing 3 of her relatives by serving them beef Wellingtons laced with poisonous mushrooms. Her lawyers are now appealing her life sentence, arguing the trial had serious errors. Katie Silver has the details from Sydney.
Back at court after less than a year, Erin Patterson has always maintained her innocence in a case that's caught people's attention around the world. Now, in a 2-day hearing in Melbourne, her lawyers are trying to persuade 3 judges that her conviction should be overturned. They argue there were numerous miscarriages of justice in the first trial. They say, for example, Ms. Patterson was forced into speaking because the judge wouldn't allow certain photos into evidence. They claim there was a catastrophic blunder where the jury stayed in the same hotel as some prosecutors and a key witness during the trial. With the original trial lasting 11 weeks, Ben Livings, an associate professor of criminal law at Adelaide University, says Patterson's team has a big task on its hands.
It is a high bar. It's going to be very difficult for the defence to convince the appeal judges that not only kind of technically something that shouldn't have happened in the trial, but also that has led to a miscarriage of justice.
A verdict is not expected by the end of proceedings on Thursday. Katie Silver for CBC News, Sydney.
More than 5,000 cases of Ebola have been confirmed in the Democratic Republic of Congo. That's according to the latest government data. The DRC is facing its biggest Ebola epidemic in its history. The disease has killed more than 2,300 people, and health officials warn that response efforts are failing to contain it. The number of cases has grown exponentially since an outbreak was first declared back in May, though data from the World Health Organization suggests it was spreading as early as February. Response efforts to the outbreak have been hampered by a number of factors, including weak health infrastructure and community resistance. And finally, dozens of biologists have traveled from across the continent to scour a coastal national park in eastern New Brunswick. They're trying to create an extensive catalog of every single plant, fungus, insect, and animal they come across. Then that includes some undiscovered species. And as the CBC's Shane Fowler reports, they're doing it all out of a temporary lab set up in a church.
Biota is the highlight of my year.
Open the doors of the United Pentecostal Church of Kujbequack near Miramichi, and you'll be greeted by dozens of scientists with their heads bowed over microscopes, as well as the smell of formaldehyde. This is the rented-out headquarters for makeshift labs as biologists catalog their daily discoveries from the Black River Protected Natural Area. It's all a part of Biota MB, where researchers like Gregory Jongsma spend 2 weeks thoroughly trying to locate, collect, and record every species they can find. He says it creates a snapshot in time of the environment and the species collected.
So these specimens will be housed at the provincial research collection for centuries to come. So this is a resource not only for active research happening today, but it's a resource for scientists over the coming generations and generations.
He says there's around 80 scientists participating in the annual event that's been running since 2009. That includes Madeline Empey, who, like most researchers here, is roughing it in a tent outside the church for the next 2 weeks. She's researching how frogs are impacted by climate change and considers it her favorite time of year.
Because you're seeing scientists and friends all the while contributing to knowledge about our province and the environment, and we want people to know about it, we want people to participate.
So she and her fellow biologists are opening those church doors this weekend to anyone who wants to view their ever-growing menagerie. Shane Fowler, CBC News, Kujbequack, New Brunswick.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Mike Wise. This is CBC News.
Well, good morning, Manitoba. You feel that chill in the air? Fall is just around the corner. Hate to say it, but it feels kind of nice, though, doesn't it? 12 degrees right now in Winnipeg. Up in Thompson right now, it's only 2. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio One. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marcy Marcousa. And coming up this hour on the show, are you concerned about street racing in your neighborhood? Winnipeg police say they're aware of incidents happening, but are asking businesses and residents to be part of the solution. We're going to hear more about how police are cracking down on illegal street racing in our city. Also, Health Canada is reviewing a new kind of vaccine aimed at protecting people against the flu. Our regular health and medicine contributor, Dr. Raj Bardwaj, will have the details on that. But up first here on the show, Canada and the Trump administration are continuing trade negotiations with those tariffs paused for 3 days, just announced by Trump last night. And U.S. booze might be coming back onto Canadian shelves as a bargaining chip in those negotiations. We're going to hear how Manitobans feel about the idea coming up first here on Information Radio. But right now at 7:11, let's check in with Megan Ketchison with a look at news headlines.
Well, people living in Dauphin with health conditions are relieved. Emergency medical services are returning to the city in less than 3 weeks. That's the promise from Manitoba's government, who wants to open a temporary ER by Labor Day. A major downpour flooded the city's hospital, forcing it to close in early July. And Manitoba's Commissioner for Teacher Professional Conduct received close to 100 complaints and reports about teacher misconduct during the office's first 15 months in operation. This, according to the Commissioner's latest annual report, and we'll get the details coming up at 7:30.
Thank you very much, Megan.
Thank you.
Well, as mentioned, 12 degrees right now in Winnipeg. We are warming up to 25 today here in this city, but you can expect increasing cloudiness near noon, and then there's about a 30% chance of showers later this afternoon. Also, overnight as well, a 30% chance of showers, dipping down to just to 15 tonight, so a little bit of a warmer night ahead. And then tomorrow, warming up to 33. It's not 33, sorry, 23, and mainly cloudy tomorrow here in Winnipeg. In Thompson, just going to give you a quick snapshot up north, as mentioned, 2 degrees only right now in Thompson. You are warming up to 20 today, though, and it's going to be mainly sunny for you. Well, let's check in now with Sierra Sanders, who is in with a look at your commute. Hello.
Hi, 33 degrees.
I wish that not to happen again until next summer now.
Yeah,
I'm okay
agree.
without getting that hot again.
I agree. We also have, for some reason, the air conditioning running in the studio.
Yes.
Keeping it pretty brisk in here.
It's always cold. Whatever it is outside, it's always way colder here in the studio.
Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, I don't know if the story is like that with other people's offices, but our newsroom is the same thing. It's either too hot, There's too cold. There's no just right here.
Middle of summer at CBC, you got to bring a sweater to work.
Exactly. Or you're going to be freezing. You're going to be freezing. I would say a good amount of people here in the newsroom, they do have blankets hanging over the back of their chairs just to be prepared.
I've seen people wearing fingerless gloves to type with as well.
Yes, it sometimes becomes an issue here. But alas, so far there's no issues on your commute. Actually, it's very quiet out there. I haven't received any calls on the commuter line, so a little lonely, but it's also good news because it means that so far as far as to my knowledge, that there's no major backups or incidents to keep an eye out for on your commute this morning. But if that does change, I'd love to hear from you, no matter how you're getting around today, whether you're walking, biking, driving, whether you were here in Winnipeg or out on those highways. I'd love to hear from you. So give me a call on that CBC commuter line. That number's 204-788-3093.
Well, as you've been hearing in the news, Canadian-American trade negotiations are ongoing after President Trump announced he's pausing new tariffs on Canada for 3 more days to finalize a potential deal between the U.S. and Canada. Now, we don't know what's in that deal yet, but we do know one of the bargaining chips on the table is U.S. booze. American liquor could be back on Canadian shelves, and CBC's Sophia Peralta-Baron went to the Liquor Mart in Osborne Village to ask Winnipeggers about the idea of U.S. booze coming back to Manitoba.
Patricia Carter. I would hate it. I feel we have to be tougher with the U.S. I appreciate Carney. I really like him, but we need to be tougher.
How else do you think we can be firmer about this?
Well, there was the whole big deal on the news, I think on your news. Doug Ford was saying, why aren't we cutting off our supply of electricity to the U.S.? And I know the U.S. would be mad, there would be retribution, but we have to show that we are strong.
Rosalia Kokin, I think this not bad. Why not? This alcohol, this not politics. Alcohol, this only alcohol. Doesn't matter.
My name's Harley Peebles. I really don't want to give more money to Trump and, that administration, though, if I'm honest. So, yeah, it's about all the hatred that he spreads and everything. I just really don't want to support him. And, with the tariffs and everything that he's doing, it's not fair to us up here, right? We didn't really do anything to him. He's just pushing back for nothing. I don't know. It's all hate to me.
Patrick Stewart. We do a pretty good job of making booze and drinking booze, and this seems to be one place, one spot where we've actually been able to have some leverage on Mr. Trump, and I don't think we should let that go for anything.
And how long do you think we should not let this go for?
As long as it takes. I don't know. Whenever the man's out of office, whenever things actually change, I think we'll know when it happens, I suppose. We need to see some real goodwill coming from the other side, and I don't know, that hasn't happened for a long time.
I think we have enough booze that we can do okay. It would go on as long as it needs to. I think the booze stuff is just the beginning in terms of other ways that we need to look at fighting the U.S.
Have you missed U.S. booze at all? Is there any drink that you've missed?
I care more about us. We count. We need to count. I know there are so many people that don't have jobs now. And the thing with Trump is he changes all the time, but we have to be firm with him, even though he might retaliate back to us again.
And how else have you seen the impact of those tariffs that you're talking about? People losing their jobs, and what else?
I think it's a spirit level. It's this sense of our country is not our country alone now, that we're being influenced negatively by people who don't seem to show any empathy or understanding for other people.
That was CBC's Sophia Peralta-Baron asking Manitobans what they think about U.S. alcohol possibly coming back to Canadian liquor stores.
My name is Kevin Mallon. We opened up an office and shop space and live and work in the West End every day. The best part about the West End is for sure the community. I get such a warm feeling driving down the streets with the trees hanging over the streets so nicely. There's kids everywhere. I help by shoveling my neighbor's walkway. They help by making delicious Indian food for me. It's a great community. Love living there.
People, places, and stories. CBC Radio One, 89.3 FM.
7:18 right now. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. Well, next up here on the show, people in parts of Canada have been dealing with smoky air from wildfires this summer. And of course, we smelt it here. We felt it here on and off here in Winnipeg and Manitoba. The fires in BC have forced thousands from their homes. It's against the backdrop that Stuart Phillip co-wrote an open letter that Prime Minister Mark Carney and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith to halt the proposed West Coast oil pipeline. He's Grand Chief of the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, and today on What on Earth, he explains why he wants Canadians to make the connection between the smoky summer they're experiencing and fossil fuel extraction.
Given the obsession that global economies, and certainly the United States and now Canada and British Columbia, investing billions of dollars in the fossil fuel industry, which directly contribute to increasing temperatures, heat waves, the deaths of thousands of people, not to mention the firestorms that are ravaging our communities. I know in my heart that this is a direct consequence of the expansion of the fossil fuel industry and everything that represents. And it's insanity that this continues to be the economic base of the global community.
You can hear the full interview between Grand Chief Stuart Phillip and guest host Anand Ram on What on Earth today at 2 p.m. Well, next up here on Information Radio, 10 years ago, iconic Canadian band The Tragically Hip took the stage for the final time in their hometown of Kingston, Ontario. Now, 1/3 of Canada's population tuned into that historic 2016 show live on CBC, and as the broadcast unfolded, the nation stood still. Lead singer Gord Downie would die of brain cancer just over a year later. And to mark the 10th anniversary, on Saturday, August 22nd at 7 p.m. local time, CBC will re-air The Tragically Hip, a national celebration, commercial-free. And leading up to that anniversary, we thought we'd love to hear from you. Where were you that night of the final show? What did Gord Downie and The Tragically Hip mean to you? What song still floods you with emotion every time you hear it? You can call our listener line and share your story. That number, 204-788-3205. That's 204-788-3205. We'll be compiling our favorite calls to be aired on Friday, and we'll pick one caller to get a neat CBC mug. And here's a song to listen to while you reminisce, and it is inspired by a Manitoba story. Here's The Tragically Hip with Wheat Kings on CBC Radio 1.
Sundown in the Paris of the prairie, wheat kings of all treasures buried, and all you hear are the rusty breezes pushing around the weather vane Jesus. Zippo-lighter, he sees the killer's fate. Maybe it's someone standing in a killer's place. 20 years for nothing, well, that's nothing new besides. No one's interested in something you didn't do. We kings and pretty things. Let's just see what the morning brings. There's a dream he dreams where the high school's dead and stark. It's a museum and we're all locked up in it after dark. The walls are lined all yellow, gray and sinister, hung with pictures of our parents' prime ministers. We kings and pretty things. Wait and see what tomorrow brings. Late breaking story on the CBC. A nation whispers we always knew that he'd go free. They add you can't be fond of living in the past. If you are, then there's no way that you're gonna last. We kings and pretty things. Let's just see what tomorrow brings.
That is the Tragically Hip with Wheat Kings, inspired by the story of David Milgaard, who spent 23 years in prison for a crime he was found later to have not committed. He was later released. Well, time now, 7:25 here on Information Radio, and time for morning sports with Scott Regehr. Hello.
Hey, Corey.
So let's start with baseball, where the Blue Jays continue to excel down the stretch.
They do. A rout of the Rays in Tampa Bay last night, Corey, means Toronto has now won 8 of its past 11 games. And helping do the routing was Alejandro Kirk. He managed a hit of every kind last night, minus a triple, which always would have been a tall task for the speed-challenged catcher. But had that happened, Jays manager John Schneider says plans were in place.
Hoping for a triple. Only career triple here. We had a bet we were all going to take our shirts off if he won a triple. Everyone in the dugout. Would have been great. It's nice. You know what you're going to get. You know what the at-bat quality is going to be. You like having him up in the box. He's kind of a little bit of both, where he can situationally hit or he can kind of get in a good count and drive the ball. So he's kind of come on at the right time for us right now.
Kirk and the Jays back in action tonight in Tampa, Corey. Toronto was a half game out of a wild card spot and one of 6 teams fighting for said spot. But the way Seattle's playing right now, we might have to remove them from that group. The Mariners, Corey, suffered their worst loss in franchise history last night. It got so bad against the Brewers, Seattle outfielder Julio Rodriguez stopped paying attention and forgot how many outs there were and threw a live ball up into the stands, which resulted in Milwaukee's 21st run in a 22-0 game. Ouch.
Wow. Things weren't quite so painful for the Toronto Tempo last night, though, but they did still fall to Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever.
They did, and the biggest star in women's basketball played her part. Clark managed 24 points and 7 assists in a game Indiana led from start to finish. Her first game on Canadian soil, and more than 20,000 fans were there to take it in. Clark says, Corey, she's looking forward to returning to this country, and not just for basketball. She was asked about a viral video she and her teammates were part of where they tried out Canadian delicacies like maple cookies and ketchup-flavored chips.
My favorite were those sour gummy bears. I don't know what they were called, I'm sorry. Coffee Crisp was good as well. Jackie told me apparently we had that in America. I've never had that before, so maybe I just need to get out and about a little bit more. But it was really fun. Like, that's what I love about going different places. You get to experience their culture and different things. Lexi and Sophie told me that a lot of people left a lot of comments on that for us when we come back here after the FIBA break to try a bunch of different things. So probably a part 2 coming as well.
And let's hope, Corey, part 2 of her Canadian snacking experience includes what for me is the unquestioned king of treats in our country, Wonder Bars. I can't believe they weren't mentioned just there.
I was also thinking Caesars as well, but I guess before a game you probably wouldn't want to give someone a Caesar.
Maybe afterwards, but no, definitely not before. As for the Toronto Tempo, things have been far from wonderful of late for them. They have lost 11 in a row and will try to right the ship in Washington tonight against the Mystics. I don't know why I write these lines in my scripts, because that's a tricky one.
Well, let's finish up now with some exciting news for Canadian soccer fans.
That, Corey, is the sound you're going to hear with regularity if you spend any time on England's south coast. A sound Promise David best get used to. The Canadian striker will play this season with the Premiership side Brighton. Nicknamed the Seagulls, Brighton have been soaring of late, routinely finishing in the top half of the table. And they've done it not with endless financial resources, but with astute scouting, which explains their interest in Promise David. He has been one of the top scorers in Belgium's top league, and after impressing for Canada at this summer's World Cup, the goals swept in to get him. David, the first out-and-out striker to play in the English Premiership from Canada since Thomas Radzinski did it a couple of decades ago. And the Brampton native, David, will not be alone when it comes to Canadian content in the Prem this season, because Liam Miller is going to suit up for Hull City. Luke de Fougerolles will do the same for Fulham. And then there's Daniel Jebison at Bournemouth. It's the most Canuck content we've ever seen in the world's best league, which begins play this weekend.
All right. Thank you very much, Scott.
You betcha.
That is Scott Regehr at your CBC Sports Desk. Still to come here on Information Radio, we're going to hear from our host, Dr. Raj Bardwaj, about a new vaccine against influenza. We're also going to get into why doctors encourage people to do what they can do to avoid the flu. That's coming up after your CBC News from Manitoba.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Megan Ketchison in Winnipeg at 7:30. Mainly sunny and 12. We're looking at a sunny day with increasing cloud later on. Chance of showers and a high of 25. The head of the Manitoba Nurses Union says she still is hearing about a shortage of nurses in rural areas. Yesterday, the province announced 4,725 full and part-time workers have been hired since the NDP was elected 3 years ago. That includes more than 1,400 nurses. Darlene Jackson says while vacancy rates in Winnipeg have decreased, more work is needed to get people working in other parts of the province.
When you get beyond the perimeter into our rural and remote and northern regions, that's where we're really seeing a lot of vacancies. It's very difficult to recruit to those areas, and that's where we're starting to see still have a lot of vacancies.
Jackson says she thinks more needs to be done to educate people where they're already living, and she wants to see more incentives for those taking jobs outside Winnipeg. In international news, Donald Trump says he is pausing the latest round of tariffs against Canada. The deal, announced late Tuesday night, means 50% tariffs on a broad range of exports are on hold for 3 days. That news will come as a relief to thousands of Canadian businesses, but anxiety remains about what it took to get the deal done. The CBC's Peter Armstrong reports.
At 10:15 last night, Donald Trump posted to social media saying he would pause his latest tariff threat because, he says, quote, Canada and the USA, subject to the finalization of documents, have a deal, end quote. Canada's business community heaved a giant communal sigh of relief. Neither Trump nor Prime Minister Mark Carney mentioned the existing sectoral tariffs on steel, aluminum, autos, and lumber. Those tariffs have caused real economic damage across the country, and getting them lowered or removed was Canada's key point in these most recent negotiations. What was mentioned was Canada's booze ban. And without saying what specifically was agreed to, the White House published a proclamation that seems to say That irritant has been resolved. Carney's statement was much more circumspect, saying only that substantial progress was being made, but that there is important work still to be done. The next deadline now looms on Friday. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
A Dauphin resident says she's relieved the province will bring back ER services soon. In early July, a major downpour flooded the Dauphin Hospital. The facility has been closed for about 7 weeks. Premier Wab Kinew now says a temporary emergency department will start seeing patients by Labor Day. Susan Teal lives with heart issues related to long COVID. She says she's glad to have healthcare services close to home again soon.
It's huge because you will get to have that peace of mind. Like if somebody has a heart attack or a stroke or whatever that needs to be seen quickly, at least there will be somebody there that can actually do something.
Kinew says some diagnostic and scan services are already operational in Dauphin. The temporary ER is expected to be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Manitoba's Commissioner for Teacher Professional Conduct received 94 complaints and reports about teacher misconduct during the office's first 15 months in operation. This, according to the Commissioner's latest annual report. The CBC's Rosanna Hempel brings us more.
It's the first annual report published since Manitoba named Noni Klassen as the new Commissioner for Teacher Professional Conduct in May. And it's the first full reporting period since the office was launched in January last year. Since then, 94 complaints about teacher misconduct have been filed. 53 from employers, and 27 from the public. In January 2025, it became mandatory for employers to report clinicians and teachers accused or convicted of child abuse or disciplined for misconduct. Complaints first head to a preliminary review, which can then lead to an investigation, then a hearing. The report says 71 of the 94 complaints were still active as of the end of March. Rosanna Hempel, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Social and community organizations in Steinbach are working together to make immigrants feel welcome. Immigrants like Cuban refugee Lazario Emiliano Recio Navarro. He speaks only Spanish, and he stayed in the city's transitional housing unit where he connected with Sarah Simbinakure of the Eastman Immigration Services.
Permanent home, going to the bank, going to the food bank, every little move. You could see that smile of hope coming.
Recio Navarro, speaking through a translator, told CBC News Steinbach is the first place in Canada he feels taken care of. And remembering one of the bloodiest events in Canadian and Winnipeg military history. Dozens of people gathered at sunset last night at Vimy Ridge Park in Winnipeg to remember those lost during the Dieppe raid. The Queen's Own Cameron Highlanders hosted the ceremony in the park to remember those in the raid in World War II. Over 500 members participated in the raid. 340 were injured, 78 died. Hugh O'Donnell with the Highlanders says it's important to commemorate the loss and show appreciation to those who serve now.
There's at least one fellow there tonight. He had family on the raid. So, yeah, it's as everybody knows at some level or another, if getting together just helps. And it helps with more current issues as well.
O'Donnell says they held the ceremony last night because it would be the exact moment the members landed in Pourville under heavy German fire. And that's the CBC News from Winnipeg. You can always find more on our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you very much, Megan.
Thank you.
That is Megan Ketchison at your CBC News desk. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio One. Let's take a look at your regional forecast here in Manitoba. In Winnipeg right now, we're looking at 12, warming up to 25 today, about a 30% chance of showers later in the day. We're going to see increased cloudiness near noon, and then, those showers coming in later this afternoon, potentially 30% chance. And also overnight, also a 30% chance of showers here in Winnipeg. Out west in Brandon, 7 right now, warming up to 26. Also a 30% chance of showers and even a risk of a thunderstorm as well this afternoon. You're dipping down to 10 overnight with a chance of showers. In Dauphin, you're sitting at 8 right now, warming up to 22 today. Also a 30% chance of showers or thunderstorms this afternoon, dipping down to 11 overnight with a 30% chance of showers. And Thompson, right now, you are sitting at 2 degrees, warming up to 20 today, though. You'd expect a sunny day ahead. Your low tonight is 12. As for your commute, been very quiet so far. We haven't heard of any major issues out there yet. But if you are walking, biking, driving, you see something going on, you can give us a call on the CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093. Well, next up here on Information Radio, a new flu vaccine has been approved by the Food and Drug Administration in the United States earlier this month. Health Canada is currently reviewing it, deciding whether it will be approved for use in this country. This flu vaccine is based on mRNA technology, and Dr. Raj Bhardwaj, a regular health and medicine contributor, is here to tell us more. Good morning.
Good morning, Corey.
So tell us more about this new vaccine.
Yeah, so it's one of the first messenger RNA or mRNA vaccines that's been developed and researched since the COVID vaccines about 5 years ago. For now, it's only approved in the U.S. for people 50 years old and older, not for younger adults or kids. And the FDA gave approval based on what are called phase 3 trials that enrolled over 40,000 people age 50 and older in 11 countries around the world. The results of that trial were published in the New England Journal of Medicine back in May. Anybody can go and read the results. It showed that the mRNA flu vaccine was about 27% more effective than the standard dose conventional flu vaccine at preventing influenza infection in people 50 or older. Now, there's a small catch. In the States and in Canada, for people 65 or older, we don't usually give a standard dose flu vaccine. We usually give a high dose flu vaccine. And so the way the study was designed means that the mRNA vaccine wasn't tested against the high dose traditional flu vaccines in people over 65. So bottom line, in the States, the mRNA vaccine is available for anyone over 50, but the FDA wants a little bit more information for people 65 and older. So Moderna, the company behind the vaccine, is going to run a big study for the next 2 flu seasons using 400,000 people. And it will compare it to the high-dose flu vaccines in people 65 and older.
And what do you know about the side effects of the mRNA flu vaccine compared to the traditional flu vaccine?
Yeah, so I mean, anytime anybody gets a vaccine, you'll feel it, right? Like you feel it in your arm, you maybe get a little bit tired, headachy, things like that. And that's what they found in this trial as well. The thing is that people who got the mRNA vaccine were more likely to have some transient side effects compared to people who got the traditional vaccine. So, for example, pain at the injection site, 66% of people who got the mRNA flu vaccine reported that, compared to 30% of people who got the traditional flu vaccine. Fatigue, it was 45 versus 20%. Headache, it was 38 versus 18. Body aches, 35 versus 12. You get the idea. But all of those side effects lasted like 1 or 2 days. None of them were serious. But I can imagine that there will be some people who will say, you know what, I'm going to just go with the traditional vaccine, a little bit less effective, but also lower chance of side effects, rather than a more effective mRNA vaccine with a higher chance that you'll feel it the next day.
And during the COVID pandemic, we heard a lot about how mRNA vaccines work. Can you just give us a quick refresher?
Yeah, sure. So traditional vaccines generally use inactivated or killed influenza virus that was grown in a lab, usually in chicken eggs. So we grow this virus, then we chop it into pieces or we inactivate it in some other way, and then the pieces are purified and put into the vaccine. So when that's injected, your immune system sees those little chunks of viral proteins. It says, hey, that's not right, and it mounts an immune response. And it remembers the immune response. So the next time it sees anything similar, like flu virus from the person who coughed on you, it can mount a defense even faster, sometimes prevent the infection or at least sort of make the infection not as bad. With mRNA vaccines, instead of growing the whole virus and then breaking it down, the vaccines inject tiny portions of the genetic code instructions via messenger RNA into your muscle cells. And then your cells build the specific proteins that are found on the flu virus. And then your cells build the proteins, then your immune system sees them and says, hey, what's that? Triggers the immune response, just like in traditional vaccines, and you build some immunity. So the mRNA that's injected breaks down very quickly, gets used up, so it doesn't hang around for long periods, which is one of the big pieces of disinformation that was going around during the COVID pandemic, is that, but the mRNA changes your DNA somehow. It does not. mRNA vaccine technology is very safe. It's been studied extensively. It's a proven tech that has been in development for decades before the COVID pandemic, like going back to the 1990s.
As you see it, what are the advantages of using mRNA flu vaccine over a traditional one?
Yeah, so 3 big advantages, I would say. So first of all, any vaccine that shows higher efficacy at preventing infection is a good thing. And the mRNA flu vaccine showed a 27% higher efficacy than traditional flu vaccines at preventing infection. So that's good. Second thing, the mRNA vaccine is actually a lot faster to develop and mass produce compared to the traditional shot. So we're talking 2 to 3 months for mRNA vaccine and about 6 months for the traditional vaccine. And that leads to the third advantage of the mRNA flu vaccine. So remember that every year there's a chance that we will have a mismatch between the flu strains that are going around in Australia right now, and that's how we choose those as, what we will probably have to deal with in our flu season coming up. But sometimes there's a mismatch between those flu strains and what actually ends up causing infection during our flu season. And there's a mismatch partly because we have to make the decision 6 months beforehand so that we have time to manufacture enough vaccine. So if we can delay that decision longer because of the shorter manufacturing time, then there's a theoretical advantage that maybe we won't have a mismatch as frequently. But we'll have to see how things pan out in real life over the next few flu seasons once we start using mRNA flu vaccines.
And why do doctors put so much emphasis on avoiding the flu?
Yeah, I feel like people underestimate how bad influenza can get. Especially for people over 50 and older. As you get older, it hits you harder. But also in pregnant people, young kids, people with medical problems. For some people, it can take weeks to fully recover. And a flu infection can, in some people, tip the balance and, they end up in hospital or worse. But the other thing is that there's a lot of delayed effects after having a case of influenza. So in the month after having influenza, your risk of having a heart attack goes up by 4 times. And your risk of having a stroke goes up by 5 times. And you can avoid that increased risk by avoiding the infection in the first place. And there's plenty of ways to avoid the infection, right? I mean, you can limit your exposure in crowds or around sick people. You can wear a mask or a respirator whenever you're sharing air indoors during flu season, and you can get your flu shot. And, if we do all that, that'll help you. It'll also help to take the stress off the healthcare system during flu season as well.
And finally, before I let you go here, Health Canada has been reviewing the data around this new mRNA flu vaccine since January. So do you expect it to be approved for use in Canada?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any special knowledge of Health Canada's process or progress on this. But remember, Health Canada is completely independent of the FDA in the U.S. So I wouldn't be surprised to see it approved. It's just a matter of the timing. Will it be approved by the time, in time to start the flu shot campaigns, in October, November? Or are we going to have the traditional vaccine this year and then maybe this option next year? But regardless of which kind of flu vaccine is available, I'll be rolling up my sleeve and getting a flu vaccine. I encourage everybody to do the same.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Bardwaj.
My pleasure.
That is our regular health and medicine contributor, Dr. Raj Bardwaj. Well, 7:46 right now. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio One. I'm Corey Funk in for Marcy Marcusa. Next up here on the show, you've probably heard it or even seen it. Loud, fast cars zooming down Winnipeg streets at reckless speed. Police say street racing continues to be an ongoing problem in all areas of the city, including some of the suburban areas of Winnipeg. This comes after numerous complaints posted on social media this month from people concerned over cars racing late at night in their neighborhood. Inspector Helen Peters is the commander of traffic services with the Winnipeg Police Service. Good morning.
Good morning.
So just give us a sense, how big of a problem is street racing right now in Winnipeg?
Well, what we know is we're having reports from multiple areas of the city on an ongoing basis at different times of the night specifically, and we're getting reports of vehicles that are traveling at excessive speeds. And when we talk about excessive speeds, whether it's street racing between multiple vehicles or just one vehicle traveling at a high speed, we're talking about speeds that are, 20, 30, 40, 50 kilometers over the posted speed limit. And sometimes it's something quite significant and serious, is almost 200 kilometers an hour. And so, of course, when we're talking about speeds of that nature, it is certainly concerning, and it is a police matter.
And which areas in particular are you getting the most reports from?
So we're seeing them in areas that are traditionally known, of course, North Main Street and around the perimeter. We've had reports along Portage to the west of the city, along the west perimeter there and into Portage Avenue, and then some excessive speeding in just some of the main kind of longer areas of our roads where people can get up to that kind of speeds. Lagimodier comes to mind. Bishop Grandin can be a place for that. But we've also received reports, and as you're aware, we've had posts in the media about investigations that have occurred in places that you just simply would not expect people to travel at speeds like that, such as the Nairn Overpass.
And are there any kind of more suburban neighborhoods as well that are seeing it?
So, sometimes I think people might report excessive speeding or street racing, but what we're actually seeing is dangerous driving. And that might be people that are revving their engines and squealing their tires and then, speeding up in very short bursts. We also have reports of that in some of the suburban neighborhoods. And sometimes I would say is some of that information is coming to us through social media versus actual police reports. And so that's one of the things where I think it's important, and one of the reasons why we want to talk to people and get the message out there that if you are witnessing this, if this is a problem in your community, you can make those official reports to us through our online reporting process, because it is important that we know. Right now, I think it's very hard for us to determine how significant this problem is because, again, the information we see on social media isn't necessarily reflected in the number of police reports we see about those concerns.
So we do know that street racing is a thing that does happen here in the city. Back in July, there was an arrest made, a 20-year-old man seen going 200 kilometers an hour over the Nairn overpass. He was caught and arrested, charged with dangerous operation of a motor vehicle, but there was another car that actually got away. What do we know about the nature of street racing in Winnipeg? Is this something that's premeditated that people meet up to do, or is it kind of two people meet eyes at a red light and off they go? How big of a problem is it?
What we've experienced in doing a couple of these investigations throughout the summer, as a result of collisions that have occurred and information we believe during that investigation, it comes to us that, people might have been street racing prior to that the collision. It happens through both those situations. There are groups that meet up in different areas of the city to race each other, whether it's on motorcycles or cars. Sometimes I think people are testing, modifications they've made to those vehicles and seeing how fast those vehicles can be driven. And then we have other people that don't know each other, but they arrive together at the same location and they look across at each other and then sort of challenge each other. We hear anecdotally stories of that happening to people who just, drive nice cars and people look at them and challenge them to race. And thankfully they have the wherewithal to refuse in that moment and shake their head and say, no, I'm not racing you. So we do know that both those situations occur here in Winnipeg.
And what have enforcement efforts looked like from police to clamp down on street racing and, this excessive speeding culture in particular?
There's a couple things that we're focused on, and the big thing, again, that I want the community to recognize is we can only address what we know about, right? And a lot of our enforcement will happen in response to police reports that we do receive, complaints directly from the community and the information, because we can't be everywhere at once. And I think the people that are engaged in street racing, especially either of those two groups, whether it's premeditated, pre-organized, or in the moment, recognize that. And so where there's patterns during the time of day or whether it's specific locations, if you're experiencing it as a community member and you're listening to those engines or you're seeing it in person and you have information that would assist us in targeting those that do need enforcement because of the dangers associated to the manner of their driving and their behaviors, then we need that information and we will target. The other thing that we're doing this year is we're working with our aviation response through the helicopter and identifying those. They have great video footage and can identify the speeds of any motor vehicle that's traveling along our roads and can locate them. That will draw our resources in and help us to identify where that's happening. So these are sort of the things that we're looking at doing. Again, a lot of this is based off the information received, and so please, people, do not hesitate in reporting these events to us.
And how many tickets have you handed out so far?
So there's tickets, but there's also criminal charges that are related to some of these incidents that have occurred through dangerous driving that's a result of collisions, as well as serious offense notices. So when something so egregious as 200 kilometers, in the middle of the city of Winnipeg, that's going to be a serious offense notice and not just a regular type of ticket. And there's been numerous this summer that we've done at various different stages and various different levels, depending on the nature of the driving and the speeds that we've been seeing and witnessing and that we've been able to record. So it's hard for me to give any one singular number because of the very different approaches that are taken based on what we've discovered.
We've heard anecdotally about racing gatherings in Sage Creek, Island Lake area. Is that something that's been on your radar?
So it's come on our radar because as you're aware, we've seen posts on social media that's kind of talked about it. But to this date, again, we really need to see those complaints come to us in the form of police reports so that we can act on those with people that we can contact and follow up and get as much information as we can. And we are aware that groups are gathering in other areas of the city in different sizes and in different numbers at different times. And so to get information directly from community would be very helpful to understand some of the types of behaviors that they're seeing and the things that we need to target for enforcement.
Finally here, you mentioned the importance of people making these reports. What can people expect to happen if they report that they've heard, even if they've just heard loud, fast cars nearby in the middle of the night or even something more egregious?
So when we get those reports, what we're looking for is, the number of reports with the geographical location that they're focused on and the types of behaviors, and we're looking at the time of day. So we'll take all that information and we can, from that, without getting into too much detail about some of our strategy, we will compile that information for an operational plans, even reach out if we need more information to understand from the caller or the reporter what exactly is happening. But it all goes to us to determine what type of enforcement and when that enforcement is going to have the most impact.
Well, Inspector Peters, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
That's Inspector Helen Peters, commander of the traffic services with the Winnipeg Police Service. Have you noticed an uptick in street racing in your neighborhood? We want to hear from you. You can give us a call and tell us about it on our listener line. That number, you can write it down, 204-788-3205. That's 204-788-3205. We'd love to hear from you. You can also email us as well at radio893@cbc.ca. That's radio893@cbc.ca. Still to come here on Information Radio after 8 o'clock. As you've been hearing in the news, Canada and the U.S. are coming closer to a potential trade deal, at least for now. There's a 3-day delay in new tariffs on Canada from the U.S. We're going to hear from the president and CEO of the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce for his thoughts on the impacts that the threat of those tariffs have had so far on Manitoba businesses and what might happen if they do come into effect. That's all coming up here on Information Radio after 8 o'clock. But right now, though, let's check in with Megan Ketchison with a look at news headlines. Hello.
Hello. Well, the head of the Manitoba Nurses Union says she's hearing still about a shortage of nurses in rural areas. Yesterday, the province announced more than 4,000 full-time and part-time workers have been hired since the NDP was elected 3 years ago, and that includes more than 1,400 nurses. But Darlene Jackson says while vacancy rates in the city of Winnipeg are decreasing, more work is needed to get people working in other parts of the province. And Manitoba's Commissioner for Teacher Professional Conduct received close to 100 complaints and reports about teacher misconduct during the office's first 15 months of operation, and we'll have details at 8:30.
Thank you very much, Megan. Very quiet commute so far out there on the road here in Winnipeg. If you do see someone going on, though, you can give us a call on the CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093. 12 degrees right now in Winnipeg. We are warming up to 25, but there is a risk of showers later this afternoon. About 30% chance or so. Also chance of showers overnight. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marcy Marcusa. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio One. We'll be back after World Report. Stay tuned.
Today on Q.
Laura Marling is known for writing introspective and deeply personal songs, but her latest album is a surprise. It's an entire record of covers featuring the music of one of Canada's most beloved children's entertainers, Raffi.
Baby beluga in the deep blue sea, you swim so wild and swim
Q,
so free.
this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen, or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current.
I'm Lindsay Duncombe. If you've spent any time on Atlantic Canada's coast this summer, there's a chance you came close to a white shark. We'll talk about what people should know about interacting with sharks as more and more appear in Canada. That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Mike Wise. U.S. President Donald Trump says the U.S. and Canada have reached a trade deal. Trump posting on social media late last night that new 50% tariffs on Canadian exports have been paused for 3 days. He has signed a proclamation delaying the tariffs that were set to take effect today. However, Prime Minister Mark Carney is taking a more restrained approach. He has issued a statement saying there is still more work to be done. The CBC's Chris Reyes joins me now from New York. So, Chris, what are we hearing from the White House?
So, Mike, in that proclamation signed by the president, the White House is confirming what Trump posted on social media and added that the pause is a result of Canada expressing a commitment to remove its own tariffs and restrictions on U.S. goods, including alcohol, dairy, and autos. So this is the part where we're very short on details at this point, including whether that commitment involves Canada putting American liquor back on store shelves, one of the issues that triggered the 50% tariff threat. Trump also suggested, with no details, on social media that the Keystone XL pipeline project may be revived as a result of these trade negotiations. This is the expansion that would have shipped Canadian crude to the U.S. President Joe Biden ended the project on his first day in office, and Trump posted an image of himself rescuing the pipeline. The White House proclamation made no mention of this detail.
Okay, well, what do we know in terms of sticking points, though?
Okay, so U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer said that more work still needs to be done and that the so-called deal will include comprehensive market access for all American goods, economic security commitments, and digital trade alignment. Greer said that this will both protect American partners and Canadian workers. But again, we're short on a lot of details over what exactly that entails. So there will likely be more intense closed-door negotiations in this very short 3-day window to get a final document that's signed by both parties.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
The CBC's Chris Reyes in New York. Ukraine's former defense minister is calling for wartime elections. In a video posted online, Mikhailo Fedorov says his nation is facing a crisis of governance. Fedorov was fired by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky back in July, despite his popularity for advances on the front lines in the war against Russia. The CBC's Crystal Gamansing has the latest from London.
Демократія не може бути заручницею Росії.
Democracy can't be held hostage by Russia, says Mikhailo Fedorov. The video, released on YouTube yesterday, reminiscent of President Volodymyr Zelensky's nightly addresses, but with multiple camera angles and music. We are facing a systematic governance crisis, says the 35-year-old. Mikhailo had been one of Zelensky's trusted insiders, a strong, popular defense minister credited for improving efforts on the front lines. But since his firing in July, he has spoken out against the Ukrainian government and what he calls wartime corruption. General elections are currently prohibited as the country has been under martial law since the full-scale Russian invasion.
It might just bury the country.
Alexander Mereshko is a member of Zelensky's political party and chair of Ukraine's Foreign Affairs Committee.
Presidential elections, theoretically, they can be held, but we need changes in our legislation. Most importantly, politically, it's very dangerous because Putin will definitely use this as a moment of kind of division.
He says despite Zelensky's term having ended in 2024, his presidential rating remains high. As for Fedorov, he says he should have been reinstated. Meanwhile, people are losing their lives. This morning in the southeastern city of Kherson, there was a deadly drone strike on a civilian bus. Olga spoke to the BBC about life in Kherson.
Every other minute, they are flying in different parts of the city. People survive. It's the only word which I can say. It's not life.
The inability to protect civilians wanting to go vote is one of the reasons given for Ukraine not changing the rules to allow for elections to go ahead. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
The Israeli military says it is launching criminal probes into 2 separate attacks on Palestinian civilians in Gaza. One in 2024 involved the killing of a family inside their vehicle and was allegedly carried out by an Israeli tank crew. One family member, 5-year-old Hind Rajab, pleaded for hours with emergency workers until they lost contact. She was found dead along with 5 relatives and 2 relief workers sent to rescue her. The IDF is also investigating the killing of 15 Palestinian paramedics in 2025. Israeli troops are accused of opening fire on their convoy, then bulldozing their ambulances and bodies into a mass grave. Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry says 73,000 people have been killed since the war began, including more than 1,000 under the U.S.-brokered ceasefire that took effect last October. An Australian murder case that has captivated people around the world is back before a judge. Erin Patterson was convicted of killing 3 of her relatives by serving them beef Wellingtons laced with poisonous mushrooms. Her lawyers are now appealing her life sentence, arguing the trial had serious errors. Katie Silver has the details from Sydney.
Back at court after less than a year, Erin Patterson has always maintained her innocence in a case that's caught people's attention around the world. Now, in a 2-day hearing in Melbourne, her lawyers are trying to persuade 3 judges that her conviction should be overturned. They argued there were numerous miscarriages of justice in the first trial. They say, for example, Ms. Patterson was forced into speaking because the judge wouldn't allow certain photos into evidence. They claim there was a catastrophic blunder where the jury stayed in the same hotel as some prosecutors and a key witness during the trial. With the original trial lasting 11 weeks, Ben Livings, an associate professor of criminal law at Adelaide University, says Patterson's team has a big task on its hands.
It is a high bar. It's going to be very difficult for the defence to convince the appeal judges that not only kind of technically something that shouldn't have happened in the trial, but also that has led to a miscarriage of justice.
A verdict is not expected by the end of proceedings on Thursday. Katie Silver for CBC News, Sydney.
More than 5,000 cases of Ebola have been confirmed in the Democratic Republic of Congo. That's according to the latest government data. The DRC is facing its biggest Ebola epidemic in its history. The disease has killed more than 2,300 people, and health officials warn the response efforts are failing to contain it. There's no approved vaccine or treatments for this rare strain. The number of cases has grown exponentially since an outbreak was first declared back in May, though data from the World Health Organization suggests it was spreading as early as February. Response efforts to the outbreak have been hampered by a number of factors, including weak health infrastructure and community resistance. A treaty being negotiated by the BC government has some people worried they may lose access to an historic site near Victoria. Hatley Castle sits on Crown land, and it's a popular filming site for movie productions. It's one of several areas which could be transferred to First Nation ownership. As Katie DeRosa reports, officials say efforts are being made to keep the site open to the public.
It's an iconic landmark in Greater Victoria. Hatley Castle and the grounds around Royal Roads University have been used as a backdrop in the X-Men movies and Deadpool. It's the most high-profile piece of Crown land included in a treaty deal with 5 First Nations on Vancouver Island. The big question, though, is will this land remain public after it's transferred to the Songhees Nation? Public consultation documents say once those lands become treaty lands, there may be limited access or even no access for public use. Caroline Elliott is an academic specializing in Indigenous self-governance.
They are not guaranteed for ongoing public access.
Robert James, the lawyer for the Tama Treaty Association and the Songhees Nation, says the goal is to keep Hatley Castle open to the public.
Songhees is trying to do that in a way that is about being good neighbors.
James says once the federal land is transferred to the Songhees Nation, the university can then buy the land. The deal nears completion at a time when recent court cases in BC have increased the public's concern about Aboriginal title claims. Mario Canseco is a pollster and president of Research Co.
The skepticism about economic reconciliation is up by double digits.
No private land is included in the treaty talks, and it could be years before the deal is finalized. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Colwood, British Columbia.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. For updates anytime, visit our website, cbcnews.ca. I'm Mike Wise. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio One, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Manitoba YouTube page. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marcy Marcusa. Well, coming up this hour on the show, as you've been hearing in the news, new tariffs on Canada paused for 3 days as the U.S. and Canada work on potentially finalizing a trade deal. We're going to dive into that and what it means for Manitoba businesses with the president and CEO of the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce. We're also going to hear from an expert from the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy about what this says about Canada and U.S.'s wider relationship and what it could mean for the trade relationship going forward, no matter whether we reach a deal or not. So we're going to dive deep into all that this half hour on Information Radio. Stay tuned. Well, right now, 8:11, let's check in with Megan Ketchison with a look at news headlines.
Well, a Dauphin resident says she's relieved the province will bring back ER services soon. In early July, a major flood forced the closure of the Dauphin Hospital. One woman living with heart issues says she'll be glad to have healthcare services close to home again. The ER will start seeing patients by Labor Day. And remembering a moment in Canadian and Winnipeg history, dozens of people gathered at sunset last night at Vimy Ridge Park in Winnipeg to remember those lost during the Dieppe raid. And we'll have more coming up at 8:30.
Thank you very much, Megan.
Thank you.
That's Megan Ketchison at your CBC News Desk. Right now in Winnipeg, we're at 13, heading for a high today of 25. It is going to get cloudier as the morning goes on around noon or so, but then by the afternoon, a 30% chance of showers late this afternoon. That's a very similar case for much of southern Manitoba as well today. Then up in Thompson, you're sitting at 6 right now, heading for a high today of 20, and you expect sun from start to finish today. Well, let's check in now with Sierra Sanders, who is in with a look at your commute. Hello.
Hi, Corey. I got some things to say, actually, so thank you to the lovely callers who gave me a call. I first heard from Marianne. She mentioned that eastbound Portage is pretty slow, and this is specifically at Tilehurst because there is some construction going on, so you're down to 2 lanes, and apparently at that intersection, it took her about 5 light cycles to get through. So eastbound Portage Avenue there at Tilehurst is very slow moving, so you want to keep that in mind there if you're out there and coming into the downtown for your day. It's quite slow as you're coming in there, specifically at Tilehurst seems to be where the big backup is. As well, I just got off the phone with Larry. As well, southbound Main Street as you're coming into the city, about a block before Chief Pegwest Trail there's a collision, a little fender bender in the curb lane there. So people are staying left to pass there. He says that traffic is moving, but there are some backups. So Main Street, southbound Main Street as you're coming into the city, just about a block before Pegwest Trail, there's a collision there, a fender bender there in the curb lane. You want to keep left to pass there. Traffic is moving, he said, but it is for sure backing up. Thank you to Marianne and Larry for giving me a call here on this otherwise pretty lonely commute so far. It was great to hear from you both, but if we have a couple minutes, a little bit of time left in the show, so if something is popping up for you, I'd love to hear about it. So give me a call on that CBC commuter line. That number is 204-788-3093.
Well, as mentioned, U.S. President Donald Trump is postponing 50% tariffs on Canadian goods for 3 days. The crushing new tariffs, valued at $28 billion, were scheduled to have gone into effect today. It now appears the two countries are close to finalizing a deal. Prime Minister Mark Carney says, quote, substantial progress has been made, although there is important work still to be done, unquote. Well, Chuck Davidson is the president and CEO of the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce. Good morning.
Good morning, Corey.
So just tell me how Manitoba businesses are feeling right now when they hear about the news of this 3-day pause.
Well, I think there's going to be a sense of relief. There's no question about that. I think a lot of businesses were probably going to bed last night with a real concern that this 50% tariffs would kick in as of midnight. And I think the fact that that's been delayed 3 days is good. And it's, I think we're very cautiously optimistic that a deal is going to be developed because I think that's important from what businesses are looking for. So again, until we see the final details, until we see that a deal is in fact done, I think businesses are still going to be a little bit nervous, but I think things are, it seems to be progressing in a manner where it appears that a deal is imminent, which would be something that I think would be very supportive by the business community, depending on exactly what those details of that are, what concessions that Canada potentially had to give up, and how it's going to impact businesses here in Manitoba is something that we're clearly going to be looking at.
And what's it been like for businesses leading up to this deadline that was this morning, as they prepared to potentially, have to pay or to have to charge, I guess, 50% more to U.S. customers?
Yeah, I think there's no question there was significant concern as a result of this, because I think this has been something that, when it was announced about a month ago, no one saw this one coming once again. We thought we had got to a place where we developed a little bit of stability in that relationship with the U.S., but again, that has continually changed over the course of these past 18 months. And so from a business standpoint, what they've been continuously looking for is we just need to get to a place of certainty. What businesses want to operate in is that area where they can have that confidence to make decisions in regards to their business and investments and in people, and we haven't been in that position for quite some time. And I think the other thing that's important for businesses is that when you get to that place, it will make a difference for them in terms of being able to continue to operate. And so, I think, again, the news last night that we've paused, that we appear to be working towards a deal. I think business will look at that as a positive. But until that deal is done, there's still going to be some concern.
What sectors here in Manitoba are the most impacted right now? As to potentially have to take on tariffs.
Yeah, look, I think it's manufacturing, and you heard of certain industries that you thought might not have been impacted, like the honey industry, for example, was one that was going to be significantly impacted, and the concerns that they were having. I think this is something that would impact businesses across the board at some respect or another, and it's something that has been concerning. I think the other thing to take in mind, though, even if we strike a deal with the United States and things get a little bit more stable, is that we learn from this. And that we recognize as well that reliance that we've had on the U.S., I think, has been changed forever. I think businesses are recognizing as well that they can't have all those eggs in one basket. They're going to start looking at other markets. They're going to start looking at interprovincial trade. They're going to start looking in terms of how they can do business in a different manner. And I think some businesses have been able to make that pivot. I think more are going to continue to do that. And it's going to be incumbent on, premiers and the Prime Minister as well to continue to focus on how we focus on really redeveloping the Canadian economy. And I think that's going to be an important lesson that we've learned from this. But I think it's going to be important moving forward that we do lessen that reliance on a partner that, for decades had been a great trading partner, but over the last 18 months, it's shown that that's not necessarily the case.
If this deal falls through and tariffs do come into effect come Friday or so, what impact will that have on Manitoba, and what will businesses have to do?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question it's going to be significant on businesses. And I think you've heard that across the board. And I think organizations like, we've seen some numbers from the Canadian American Business Council have indicated that, if a deal is not reached, over 100,000 jobs in Canada will be lost. More than 215,000 jobs in the U.S. will be lost as a result of this. So it would be unfortunate that we went down that path, simply because, we've been each other's best trading partner for decades. We've been the gold standard of what a trade relationship should look like. And to throw that all out the window would be a real unfortunate situation, and one that would impact businesses on both sides of the border. Costs would go up. We know that's the case, that's basically what tariffs are. Tariffs are a lose-lose game, and we've talked about this for 18 months. It increases costs for consumers, it increases costs for business, and nobody wins with tariffs. So going down this path is not something that we want to do.
Well, Chuck, we'll leave it there. Thanks for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
Anytime, Corey.
That was Chuck Davidson, the president and CEO of the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce. And for even more on this story, we've reached Drew Fagan. He is a professor at the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy at the University of Toronto. Good morning.
Hi, Corey.
So what's your reaction to this temporary pause on U.S. tariffs?
Well, I guess there were a few possible outcomes overnight. One, talks off. Tariffs imposed, possibly counter tariffs. Two, a deal. That's what's claimed by Trump. The Prime Minister didn't confirm that, so we can talk more about that, or three, an agreement with certainty. So we're in kind of the middle ground. Certainly there's progress being made. There's no question with regard to that. But you kind of say progress with a bit of an asterisk, I suppose, because let's remember that the whole era of free trade was supposed to mean that there aren't tariffs. So Trump has basically upended that entirely. So what we're trying to do, we Canada, is reduce the tariffs. There's no question that tariffs will continue in some form. So they're getting closer. I would expect, it's hard to predict, but over the next 2 or 3 days, all sides will say that there is an agreement. The question then will become, what does that agreement look like in terms of detail? Big difference between a 5% tariff, a 15% tariff, a 25% tariff for key Canadian sectors with significant exports to the United States. But it is progress.
So we don't really know any details of what that potential deal might look like yet, as you mentioned, but we do maybe have some clues. President Trump posted on social media a picture of himself pulling a giant pipeline out of the ground with, quote, Keystone written on its side. A tombstone is next, also on this obviously fabricated picture that reads, buried by Biden. So what do you make of that?
So I think the president intended this as a sweetener, showing some degree of good faith for someone who seldom does that in the first place. You'll remember Keystone Pipeline goes back 20 years at least. A bit of it was actually built, stopped. The point was to significantly increase exports, Canadian oil exports to the United States, stopped for political reasons by Democratic administrations, Obama and then Biden. Trump has always been in favor of it. Would significantly increase our oil exports to the United States. And that is interesting in a couple of contexts. One, Trump complains about Canada's trade surplus with the United States, but that's entirely due to our energy exports. And two, the Prime Minister has been talking in the context of, the problems Trump has thrown at us about expanding our energy exports internationally, particularly to Asia. So, it's good news, I suppose, and the Prime Minister has wanted to increase exports to the United States, even as we do so as well globally. We'll see what comes of it, particularly in the context of not just these negotiations, but the bigger negotiation to come, assuming we have a deal, which is about CUSMA entirely, the relationship with Mexico and all sorts of other issues. That's probably to come as well.
And what are you expecting in terms of concessions that Canada might be making in this potential deal?
So the fundamental issue is how low Canada can get the existing tariffs to go. When Trump imposed 25% tariffs. That's the rough number, and it's complicated because there are exemptions, but let's deal with that number. 18 months or so ago, Canada has always been intent on either eliminating those or getting them down. It's apparent that we're not going to be able to eliminate those, and the natural response then is to say, well, then we don't have free trade, right? Which is true, we don't. But to get the tariffs down. There's a big difference between 5%, 15%, 25% for key Canadian sectors like steel, aluminum, autos in particular, fundamental. And we'll see, assuming there's a deal in the next couple of days, what the numbers look like and whether the industries are supportive of the number that we come out with. Let's remember that, maybe it's not a bad deal. The Prime Minister has promised he won't sign a bad deal, but it's not a great deal. And a lot will turn on the impact in terms of competitiveness on those sectors.
And which companies do you think might be happy with the outcome of this deal?
Well, I'm not sure anybody on the Canadian side is going to be happy with it. I think, again, it's the best we can get in the circumstances with a bilateral negotiation with the United States that really, is doing this negotiation in bad faith or based on an ideology, the president's ideology that, is counter to the facts, if I can put it that way. So, certain sectors are more impacted than others. There's also the dairy sector, which is fundamental. There's the issue of alcohol, putting back on provincial shelves. So I think in the end, there'll be a deal that, it'll be difficult to live with, but we can live with. And if that does take place, it'll be interesting to see what kind of support the Prime Minister gets from the key sectors. That'll be fundamental. And how he touts this or analyzes it, speaks to the Canadian public. The public isn't deferential to him, I don't think, but they do have confidence in him and his judgment based on his experience. And he'd be smart assuming there's a deal, not to exaggerate the benefit of it. All we've really managed to do is, maybe staunch the bloodshed and then fight another day. And that's hardly a victory, but it's also not a defeat.
And finally, here in the last minute or so that we got together, if a deal is finalized and Canada makes concessions, how challenging will it be for the Prime Minister to sell the agreement to Canadians?
Exactly. So that will be key. I think Canadians, as I say, have great confidence in him and his judgment. And I think that it's probably a deal that the opposition parties are going to attack because we're moving backwards from, an era in which, the United States is our, by far, our biggest market, fundamental, primordial. But, it's the best deal in the circumstances. So it is going to be difficult for him to sell a deal that he himself knows is actually not that great. He will make the argument that, this was imposed on us by the United States, and we've done the best deal we could. Meanwhile, he is doing everything he can to expand markets globally.
Well, Drew, thanks for your time this morning. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Corey.
That's Drew Fagan. He's a professor at the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy at the University of Toronto.
Manitoba is a conversation that never stops. From your first coffee with information radio to the midday pulse of Radio Noon and the drive home with Up to Speed. Don't let your day get in the way of your favorite shows. Just open the CBC News app, tap the local drop-down, and hit play. Bring your community with you. Download the CBC News app and stay live with us.
8:28 right now, and I want to let you know about a couple interesting stories we're working on for later this week on Information Radio. You may have seen them up around town, billboards asking questions about Jesus or pushing back on evolution. Our faith contributor has spoken to some of the people behind those billboards, and he's going to bring us that conversation coming up later this week on Information Radio. Also, another story we're working on, Winnipeg has an issue with vacant buildings catching fire. Most recently, you can think of what happened at Bougie there on Main Street. We're going to speak with the city about how big of a problem it really is and what makes vacant structures particularly susceptible to fire. So those conversations coming up later this week on Information Radio. But right now, let's check it with Marjorie Dowhouse, who's a host of Radio Noon, to talk about today's call-in. Hello.
Hey, Corey. Well, I know it's August. Temperature's cooling off a little bit. It kind of feels like fall out there, don't you think?
Oh, it does. It was like, I think, 9 degrees on my way in this morning.
Yeah, lots of thoughts, too, turning to back to school. But we're not going to talk about regular back to school subjects. We're going to talk about e-scooters here because, of course, kids trying to find ways to get to school. As you may recall, there were recently stories and stats that were reported by some Canadian pediatricians about the number of injuries that they are seeing that can be connected or that have been connected to e-scooter usage. So today the question is on Radio Noon. If you're a parent, would you allow your child to have an e-scooter? If your child already has one, how do you keep them safe? So join in the conversation coming up at 12:15 on Radio Noon.
Really important conversation. I've seen a few kids around town reaching up to grab those handlebars on e-scooters.
Yeah,
so,
you see them everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
People of all ages using them out there, but we're going to focus in particular on children coming up on Noon.
Thank you very much, Marjorie.
Thanks, Corey.
That's Marjorie Dowhouse, host of Radio Noon. Well, time now for your CBC News from Manitoba.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Megan Ketchison in Winnipeg at 8:30. Mainly sunny and 13. Sunny today. Increasing cloud. We have a chance of showers later on and a high of 25. The head of Manitoba's Chambers of Commerce says while a pause on the latest round of U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods brings a sense of relief, businesses here are still left waiting to see how a potential trade deal will impact them. Chuck Davidson says tariffs and threats of new 50% levies brings uncertainty and affects the ability to plan.
A deal done that will provide businesses with that certainty, because when they don't have that, it makes it difficult for them to make those key investments in their business. Is now the time to invest in whether it be machinery or upgrades? whether it be investing in people as well. It puts them in a sense where they're not exactly sure what to do. And when businesses are in that phase, they typically like to stand pat.
President Donald Trump announced a 3-day delay on the tariffs as Canada and the U.S. finalized a trade deal. More work is needed to get nurses working in rural areas. That's according to the head of the Manitoba Nurses Union. Yesterday, the province announced 4,725 full and part-time workers have been hired since the NDP was elected 3 years ago, including more than 1,400 nurses. Darlene Jackson says the vacancy rate in Winnipeg has decreased, but she's still hearing about staffing challenges in areas outside the city.
For many of the members and many nurses, when they hear that information, depending on where they are, will say, if you've hired that many nurses, where are they?
Jackson says she'd like to see incentives for those working outside the perimeter and thinks more should be done to educate people where they already live. In the first 15 months it has been operating, Manitoba's Commissioner for Teacher Professional Conduct received 94 complaints about teacher misconduct. It's the first annual report published since Noni Clausen was named the new Commissioner for Teacher Professional Conduct in May, and it's the first full reporting period since the office was launched in January last year. 53 of the complaints came from employers, 27 from the public. In January 2025, it became mandatory for employers to report clinicians and teachers accused or convicted of child abuse or discipline for misconduct. Complaints first head to the preliminary review, and then that can lead to an investigation and then a hearing. Emergency medical services are returning to Dauphin in less than 3 weeks. That's the promise from Manitoba's government, who wants to open up a temporary ER by Labor Day. A major downpour flooded the city's hospital, forcing it to close down in early July. Dauphin resident Susan Teeley says not having an ER in the city for weeks has been scary.
We don't have anywhere close to run to. That's always in the back of your mind, right? And my neighbor's had a stroke before, and his wife is saying, just like, oh my gosh, you better not have another stroke. You better not. What'll we do?
Emergency medical Premier Wab Canoe says the temporary ER will be staffed like any other emergency department in the province. It will be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A newcomer to Canada says he's thankful to have found himself in a southeast Manitoba city. Cuban refugee claimant Lazaro Emilio Riseo Navarro found himself in Steinbach, a community where he had no connections. Not knowing where to go and in transitional housing, he connected with the Eastman Immigrant Services. Riseo Navarro spoke to CBC News through a Spanish translator.
Bueno, hasta hoy nunca había recibido este servicio en Canadá.
So he's saying this is the first time he received help. He is in shock because he has been in different places in Canada, and this is the first time that someone is taking care of him.
EIS settlement facilitator Sarah Simbi Nakure helped Riseo Navarro find permanent housing and other supports. In the last year, EIS has helped 11 other families in similar situations. He plans to take English classes and start working in the community. Dozens of people gathered in Vimy Park in Winnipeg last night to remember the sacrifices made by soldiers during the Dieppe raid and beyond. The event was held at the exact time more than 500 members of the Queen's Own Cameron Highlanders landed under heavy German fire in World War II. Hundreds were injured, 78 died. Half of the predominantly Canadian troops were killed, and it is remembered as one of the bloodiest days for Canadians in the Second World War. Hugh O'Donnell is a member of the Highlanders. He says it's important to commemorate the sacrifices made by then and military members now.
That we haven't forgotten them. The guys who went, the guys who came home, the guys who came home broken, we're recognized that now as PTSD. At the time, well, he's just another fellow who had a bad war. And that we continue to do so.
O'Donnell says despite the Dieppe raid happening 84 years ago, there was at least one family member of a person who was there at the memorial last night. And that's the CBC News from Winnipeg. You can always find more on our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks for the morning, Megan.
Thank you.
That's Megan Ketchison at your CBC News desk. Sierra Sanders, what's going on with the commute?
Yeah, Corey, heard from Larry there, Main Street southbound as you're heading into the city there. There was a little bit of a fender bender collision there, just about a block before Chief Peguis Trail. He said that it was in the curb lane, so he wanted to keep left to pass there to avoid that collision there. He said traffic was moving, but there were some backups. So that's southbound Main Street as you're coming into Winnipeg there, a collision there blocking about a block before Chief Peguis Trail there. As well, also heard from Marianne that eastbound Portage is moving pretty slow, specifically at Tilehurst there. It goes down to 2 lanes due to some construction there, so kind of right in front of Polo Park. Took her about 5 light cycles to get through. So it might be a little bit slow moving through there, so you want to keep an eye out for that.
Thank you very much, Sierra. Right now, Winnipeg 13 heading for a high today of 25. It's going to get cloudier as the day goes on with a 30% chance of showers late this afternoon. Big thanks to our associate producers, Kaylin Monkman and Sophia Peralta-Baron. Our news team, Megan Ketchison, Joni Nicolou, Lana Cole, and Darren Bernhardt. And our live team, Travis Peterson, Jenica Sewell, and Sierra Sanders. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marcy Marcus. I hope you have yourselves a lovely Wednesday. We'll be back tomorrow. Up next on CBC Radio 1, The Current. Have a good one.